Chapter 383. The old berserker let out a cold harumph. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his left hand and swung it at Su Ming. With it, waves of blood surged into the sky around his body. But at that moment, the old berserker's expression suddenly changed drastically, something that had never happened before. Because as the incoming Su Ming lifted his right hand, he stretched out his index finger. That index finger with the strand of hair that contained the power of the god of berserkers was a finger that could destroy the world and shock those in the berserker soul realm. Su Ming had only lifted his finger, had only made it seem as if he was about to touch the sea of blood that had been stirred up by the old berserker, and only the strand of hair on his finger showed signs of burning. Just because of that, a terror that made the old berserker's soul shatter erupted uncontrollably from the bottom of his heart. Ever since he reached the berserker soul realm, he had rarely encountered this sort of terror. This sort of terror even surpassed the terror he felt when he had gritted his teeth and taken that one step when he had attained great completion in the bone sacrifice realm. This sort of terror was something he had never experienced before in his life. It was a shock that was unique to him, and it surpassed everything he had ever experienced in his life. It was like a form of judgment. This was judgment. It was as if the person before him was not the frail Su Ming, but a gigantic figure that was looking at him, lifting his right hand and pointing at him. That figure was like the first god of berserkers. This was the judgment of the first god of berserkers, the finger of judgment that would take away his life, take away his will, and take away everything he had. Before that finger, he did not have any strength to fight back, neither did he have any will to fight back. In fact, he even had a feeling that he was as frail as a thin piece of ice that would shatter at the slightest touch. That fear turned into a tidal wave that practically drowned his mind, causing the old berserker's pupils to shrink. He let out a shrill scream of pain and swiftly retreated. This was something he did instinctively. If he did not retreat, he would definitely die, and if he did not retreat, then his body would go against his will. His heart seemed to have stopped beating at that moment, as if he did not even dare to move a single inch under that finger. Almost the instant he retreated, blood trickled down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. A glint suddenly appeared in his eyes, and just as he was about to extend his finger and the strand of hair on his finger was about to burn, he immediately pulled his finger back. He was already mentally prepared for the power of the god of berserkers, but even so, what he felt at that moment still shocked him. Su Ming was slightly unwilling to use such a great power to kill this berserker in the berserker soul realm. I only have 2 chances to use it. I was forced to leave the land of berserkers because of this power of the god of berserkers. If I use it once so easily, it won't be worth it. The moment Su Ming pulled his right index finger back, green light shone at the center of his brows, and the small sword charged towards the old berserker with a whistle. Su Ming did not look at the results. With one move, he charged towards the sky in the distance. As he moved forward, he brought out medicinal cores and swallowed them in big mouthfuls. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the distance. The small virescent sword was incredibly quick. When it charged towards the old berserker, it pierced through his chest and followed closely behind Su Ming, disappearing in the span of a breath. Once Su Ming disappeared, the old berserker coughed out a mouthful of blood and lifted his head swiftly. A complicated expression that was a mixture of fear and ferociousness appeared on his face. After some time, he lowered his head and touched the wound on his chest. His heart had been pierced through by the sword. If it was anyone else in his place, they would have died a long time ago. But to an old monster in the berserker soul realm, this was not enough to kill him. There was a complicated look on the old man's face as he stared at the spot where Su Ming had left into the distance. He hesitated, but soon the greed in his eyes dispelled that hesitation. He gritted his teeth and did not continue chasing after Su Ming. Instead, he flew towards the ground, intending to heal his wounds first. The power of the god of berserkers. This is the power of the god of berserkers. This is a power that surpasses the berserker soul realm. If I have it, then no one in the berserker soul realm will be my opponent. And the true use of this power is not to kill, but to comprehend. The old man's eyes were filled with madness and greed. If I can frequently gain an epiphany to this power when I attain great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, or when I'm in the later stage, then I might have a chance to reach Berserker Soul Realm. To those old monsters who have attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, this thing is enough to make them go mad. The old man's breathing quickened, and it affected his wounds. However, he had long since forgotten about this pain. At that moment, his mind was filled with the shock brought to him by the power of the god of berserkers. Su Ming's caution had allowed him to avoid being killed once. If he had attacked again because of the old man's dazed state, then he would have had to use the power of the god of berserkers, or else he would not have been able to withstand the counterattack from that old monster in the Berserker Soul Realm. After all, his level of cultivation was still too low. Besides, he could not always use the power of the god of berserkers either. That power would be released when that strand of hair burned, and if he kept using it over and over again, then it would be better for him to just kill him once. As the old man temporarily gave up on chasing after him and searched for a place to heal his wounds, Su Ming continued fleeing in the sky. Blood continued flowing out of the corners of his mouth, and if it was not because he had medicine supporting him, he would have died a long time ago. After fleeing for 3 days, Su Ming fell swiftly to the ground. This was a grayish-black land, and there was an air of ruin everywhere. Su Ming landed with a bang on the ground and coughed out a mouthful of blood once again. Since I don't want to waste the power of the god of berserkers, then I'll have to think of other ways to kill this person. Su Ming wiped away the blood, and his breathing quickened. He looked around him. This place was empty, and there was not a single soul in sight. This person's extreme speed is simply too shocking. He actually managed to travel 80,000 feet in an instant. This is no longer a problem of speed, but another method. Su Ming thought back to the battle 3 days ago, and his heart still pounded in fear. Berserker Soul Realm. This is the Berserker Soul Realm. Su Ming struggled to stand up. Once he swept his gaze across the land, he saw an endless amount of ravines and cracks on the plains. He had no idea how this strange landscape was formed. He stood there and looked at it for a long while before he lifted his right hand and touched the bag in his bosom. Immediately, a ray of red light flew out and turned into the fire ape by his side. There were still a large number of human heads tied to the fire ape's waist. It held a rod in its hand, and once it appeared, anxiety appeared on its face. Clearly, it had been paying attention to Su Ming's actions in the world outside while it was in the storage bag. It was like the great battle, the appearance of the 2 deity statues, and the chase from the old monsters in the Berserker Soul Realm. Su Ming looked at the fire ape and saw a hint of terror in its eyes. In silence, he lifted his right hand and swung it. Immediately, the chain on the fire ape's neck was released. As the chain fell off, the fire ape instantly regained its freedom. The desire for freedom was something the fire ape had been dreaming of ever since it was captured. Now that it had suddenly obtained it, it was stunned. I promised you that once you came to the land of the shamans, I would give you your freedom. This is the land of the shamans. You have to be careful. Don't get close to the people anymore. Before long, a great disaster will happen in this land. With your intelligence, you might be able to find a way to survive. Go. I'm being chased down, and I can't send you off. If we are fated to meet again in the future, we will meet again. Su Ming looked at the fire ape. No matter what, this ape was not Xiaohong. Su Ming knew this. That was why he did not want to force the fire ape to stay. Instead, he gave it its freedom. The fire ape was momentarily stunned before it cast Su Ming a glance. With one swift leap, it turned into a fiery red shadow that charged into the distance. With a few leaps, it disappeared from Su Ming's sight. As the fiery red shadow disappeared, melancholy rose in Su Ming's heart. He remained silent for a moment before he shook his head and swept his gaze across the ravines and cracks around him. He chose one of them and jumped down. He had to immediately perform breathing exercises to heal his injuries. The power of that palm strike from the old monster in the Berserker Soul Realm had made his organs feel as if they were about to shatter. If it was not because he had taken in a large amount of medicine, Su Ming would not have been able to withstand it. More importantly, cracks had appeared on his 4 berserker bones due to that palm strike from the old monster in the berserker soul realm. To Su Ming, this was the most fatal injury. Su Ming opened up a temporary stone chamber for training in a gigantic ravine on the plains. He sat down cross-legged inside, closed his eyes, and began exercising his breathing. Yet the moment he closed his eyes, he immediately opened them, and a fiery red figure appeared at the exit of the stone chamber in the ravine. It was the fire ape. It bared its teeth at Su Ming and even swung its fist in the air before pointing outside. After gesticulating for a long time, it finally rolled its eyes and leaned to the side as if it was throwing a tantrum. I know that this place is barren. All right, you can continue staying by my side for now. You can leave when we reach a place that's not as barren. Su Ming smiled and looked at the fire ape before he closed his eyes. The battle Su Ming had participated in outside Sky Mist City had ended, but the war was still ongoing. A new round of gathering was going on within the territories of both sides. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before another round of slaughter would begin. Su Ming's departure caused quite a number of people in Sky Mist City to choose to remain silent. It was as if everyone had come to an agreement that they would no longer talk about this matter. As for the old berserker who had chased after Su Ming, no one talked about him either. An indescribable atmosphere surrounded the powerful berserkers in Sky Mist City in a bizarre manner. Tianlan Meng remained silent about this matter. No one knew what she was thinking. As for the 100-something followers of Su Ming, Yin Bo, Ziche, and the others, they did not understand Su Ming's actions and also remained silent. Within Sky Mist City, the stone monument that recorded the war achievements would change every single day as it recorded the berserkers' war achievements. Su Ming's name was not on it, but there was a person called Yu Feng who had fought his way into the top 200. At that moment, in Sky Mist City, there was a young man with long black hair, a handsome face, and a bewitching air about him when he smiled. He was handing over a storage bag to a Sky Mist person under the stone monument that was used to record the war achievements in Sky Mist City. Yu Feng gained 37 war achievements. Rank 198. The person from Sky Mist City who recorded the war achievements lifted his head and cast a glance at the black-haired man before him. Thank you. The enchanting young man smiled faintly. When he turned around and left, he cast a glance in the direction of the shamans. Master, what are you doing now? Are you being hunted down? Haha, I can feel that one day I will surpass you and become the true fire berserker in the world. Second chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 384. The land of the shamans gave off a desolate feeling. Most of the ground was grayish-black, with very little green. It was filled with an oppressive air, as if it was the source of death. The color of the sky was not blue either, but gray. It was as if a sandstorm had swept up the sand and covered the sky. Compared to the land of the berserkers, the land of the shamans lacked a hint of life. The ground was filled with ravines and cracks. Those cracks crisscrossed the land, and no one knew how long they had been there. No one knew whether they were man-made or were caused by the changes in the land. Besides the moaning sounds of the wind, there was only relative silence in the area. Only some of the small beasts that lived in this sort of environment would occasionally show themselves on the ground. On the grayish-black ground, there was a huge ravine. In a very hidden place, there was a thick crack. In the depths of the crack, there was a stone room that had been artificially opened. Su Ming sat there with his eyes closed. His face was pale as he slowly exercised his breathing. The fire ape was crouching at the entrance of the crack before him, occasionally turning its head back to look at Su Ming. Su Ming had already changed out of his bloody robes. At that moment, he was wearing a black robe. His long hair fell over his shoulders, and on his right wrist was a bracelet formed by black smoke. It was spinning slowly. His index finger looked incredibly normal. There were only a few strands of hair wrapped around it, but the power contained within that one finger could intimidate all the old monsters in the Berserker Soul realm, and it could destroy the world. Time trickled by. After an unknown amount of time, Su Ming opened his eyes slowly. The instant he did so, a profound look appeared in his eyes, and even his presence changed. He was like the sea, causing others to be unable to see through his mind. Bone's sacrifice realm. Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. He could clearly feel the difference in himself. The 4 berserker bones on his spine were shining with a blue light, and they contained an explosive power. That power not only allowed Su Ming to sense the faint power in the world, it also made him much stronger than when he had transcended. Most of the cracks on the 4 berserker bones had already healed. Only 3 cracks remained, and they would need some time before they could completely heal. Leaving the battlefield was an accident, but since this accident happened, it might also be an opportunity for me. I'll increase my power here. Then I'll search for the long-haired woman who appeared in the battlefield. She knows a lot about destiny. Perhaps I'll be able to find my answers from her. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he lifted his right hand to touch the center of his brows. The instant his finger landed, wind immediately stirred up in his body. That wind seemed to have become a part of him as it circled around his body. It did not seem to have any form and was only scattered about. But even so, it was enough to make Su Ming's speed increase by a large margin compared to before. It's a pity that I don't know how to make the provenance of wind stronger. As Su Ming mulled over his thoughts, he brought out a crystal the size of a fist from his storage bag. The instant he brought it out, wind immediately started swirling in the stone chamber, letting out moaning sounds. That wind came too suddenly, causing the fire ape to turn its head towards it swiftly. Once it saw that it was Su Ming who did it, it relaxed. With the wind crystal of inheritance in hand, Su Ming pressed it slowly against the center of his brows. However, the instant the crystal touched the center of his brows, a strong sense of rejection came from within, as if it refused to fuse with Su Ming no matter what. After some time, Su Ming removed his right hand with a dark expression on his face. He stared at the crystal in his hand and let out a cold harumph. "You don't acknowledge me." Su Ming remained silent for a moment. Once he put it away into his storage bag, he closed his eyes slowly. At the same time, the wind separation/art he obtained from the deity statue of Berserker Soul appeared in his head. This art was an art that was solely inherited by the true divinity Wind Berserker and was separated from the crystal of inheritance. Clearly, this art itself was extraordinary. Su Ming had obtained the complete art, and there were only 3 styles. The first style was Sun Genesis. The second style was Lunar Burial. The third style was Wind Separation. These 3 styles were related to the wind, and Su Ming could feel that they were filled with a great amount of power, but it was like an illusion. He could only sense them, but he could not figure them out. Crystal of Inheritance. Su Ming opened his eyes and frowned. He could already guess that the reason why he could not figure out these 3 styles was because he had yet to fuse with the crystal of inheritance. But since the 3 styles of wind separation were inherited separately, then perhaps I don't need the crystal of inheritance to understand them. As Su Ming fell into silence, the 3 styles he obtained continuously appeared in his head. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days went by. During these 3 days, Su Ming did not go out. He stayed in the temporary stone chamber in the crack and thought about the 3 styles of wind separation, but he did not make any progress. It was as if the crystal of inheritance was the only way, and besides that, there was no other way. If he could not fuse with the crystal of inheritance, then the 3 styles of wind separation in his head would be like an illusion. He could only sense them, but he would not be able to obtain the details. In fact, he would only be able to sense them vaguely, as if there was a veil covering the 3 styles of wind separation, causing him to be unable to see them clearly. On an afternoon 3 days later, Su Ming, who had been meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he stood up swiftly. With a wave of his arm, the fire ape turned into a ray of red light and was put away by Su Ming. Su Ming charged out like a long arc, but he did not fly out of the ravine. Instead, he charged into the deeper parts of the ravine and rushed out from another direction. When he rushed out, Su Ming wore a bamboo hat that covered his face, hiding his black robes. No one would be able to tell that he was a berserker from his appearance. He was so quick that in the blink of an eye, he had already rushed into the sky. Not long after Su Ming left, the air around the ravine where he had stayed for a few days distorted, and a person walked out. That person's face was incredibly dark, and there was a murderous look on his face. Naturally, it was the old man. It had been nearly half a month since he chased after Su Ming into the land of the shamans. He had been delayed for some time to kill that shaman, and he had also been intimidated by Su Ming's power of the god of berserkers. His chest had been pierced through by a sword, and he had also spent some time healing himself. If he did not have a unique method to find Su Ming, he would have lost him a long time ago. Yet even so, since Su Ming had always been able to sense his arrival beforehand, he could still somewhat explain it away the first time. But when this happened the second time, there was no way the old man would not know that there was something strange about Su Ming. As expected of a true divinity who has inherited his legacy. You're only in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm, and I've already chased after you for so many days. If you had the chance to grow, then you might have truly reached the Berserker soul realm. You could have run even further away, but you chose not to, as if you were provoking me. Instead, you waited for me to catch up and lured me deeper into the land of the shamans. You're not a shaman either. Doing this won't do you any good. The old Berserker let out a cold harumph. After closing his eyes for a moment, as if he could see the direction in which Su Ming had left, the instant he opened them, he turned into a long arc and chased after him. Su Ming charged through the sky. His face was calm under the bamboo hat, but there was killing intent in his eyes. However, this person's level of cultivation was simply too high. Su Ming was absolutely not his opponent. If he did not use the power of the god of berserkers, it would be too difficult for him to kill this person. The only thing Su Ming could think of was to use the shamans to kill this person. That was why he continued flying deeper into the land of the shamans. He believed that if he continued charging forward like this, he would definitely attract the attention of the shamans. As for how he would hide his identity once the shamans arrived, Su Ming had already made preparations for this. Time passed by quickly, and the afternoon went by in the blink of an eye. When the setting sun shone with its last rays of light and dusk was about to arrive, the old man had already caught up to Su Ming 200,000 feet behind him. As the old man charged forward, he had already swallowed a large amount of medicinal liquid. It was fortunate that he had made ample preparations, or else it would have been difficult for him to maintain such a high speed. Due to the provenance of wind in his body, not only was Su Ming incredibly fast, he also did not use up much of his energy. This was the power of the Wind Berserker. Su Ming might not have a lot of control over it, but it was still acceptable. Yet even so, he had still swallowed a large amount of medicinal liquid. However, Su Ming's medicinal liquid was naturally much higher than the old man's. That was why as the two of them offset each other's medicinal liquid, the old man could only close the distance of 200,000 feet during the afternoon. Or else, with the huge difference in their levels of cultivation, it would have been impossible for Su Ming to escape for these few days. When he saw that the old man was already 200,000 feet behind him, Su Ming remained calm. Once he scanned the area with his divine sense, his body rose up once again, and with his speed, he instantly charged into the sky above the 9 heavens, right at the highest spot in the sky, where there was an endless amount of violent gusts of wind. Almost the moment Su Ming rose up, the old berserker who was 100,000 feet behind him almost started cursing loudly. His face was so dark that it looked like ice that would never melt, and a feeling of helplessness rose in his heart. Over the past few days, every single time he closed in on Su Ming would immediately fly into the high gust of wind in the 9 heavens. His speed was not affected in the slightest under that strong gust of wind, but the old man could not help but slow down. Once he widened the distance between them, Su Ming would no longer continue staying in the layer of high gust of wind. Instead, he would ascend once again and create a huge ruckus at a low altitude. He would leave with loud, rumbling sounds, as if he was afraid that no one would be able to see him. Damn it! Anger burned in the old man's eyes, but his heart was filled with helplessness. A few days ago, when he was chasing after Su Ming, he had cast an art that used up quite a large amount of his power, causing him to instantly travel 80,000-something feet and appear right before Su Ming. He had originally thought that he would definitely be able to kill Su Ming, but Su Ming had managed to withstand it. He might have been injured badly, but he had still ended up in a pathetic state. From then on, Su Ming no longer gave him the chance to get closer to 80,000 feet. Usually, when he was 200,000 feet away, he would immediately flee into the layer of high gust of wind. The old man also did not dare to warp anymore. This art used up too much of his power, and more importantly, he was also incredibly wary of Su Ming. He was torn between whether he should chase after Su Ming or not. The third chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 385. My young friend, I bear no ill will. I only attacked last time to make you stay. The old man's voice traveled forward like a thin thread from the layer of high wind. After all, you're a deserter from the Berserker tribe. You left the battlefield, and you can be said to be a traitor. I attacked because of this. As a true divinity, I can give you a chance. Come back to Sky Mist City with me, and I will guarantee that your life won't be in danger. No matter what the old man said, Su Ming, who was several hundreds of thousands of feet away, did not even turn his head back. He did not say a single word and simply widened the distance between them. You might have the power of the god of Berserkers, but I believe that you won't want to waste your only 2 chances. Besides, this is only a clone of mine. It's my fortune to experience the god of Berserker's finger with my clone's power. The old man's face was dark as he continued speaking. How about this? I swear on my statue of the god of Berserkers that I won't hurt you, but you can't continue running either. Stay here and follow me for a month so that I can study the power of the god of Berserkers. Don't worry, I won't let you do this for nothing. I'll give you a treasure. The old man was also resigned. He longed for the power of the god of Berserkers from the bottom of his heart, but after the life and death experience, he became incredibly wary of Su Ming. However, this made him feel incredibly conflicted, because he was wary of Su Ming's power that could only be used twice. He was completely unbothered by Su Ming himself. It was precisely this conflict that caused him to struggle between chasing after Su Ming and not chasing after Su Ming and being surrounded by greed. If he chased after Su Ming and forced him into a corner, once he decided to waste his one chance, then he could already predict what would happen to him. However, if he did not chase after Su Ming, he would not be able to accept giving up just like this when he was already so far into the land of the shamans. However, if he continued chasing after Su Ming like this, it would be difficult for him to catch up to Su Ming due to the wariness in his heart. As time passed, and they went deeper into the land of the shamans, he felt increasingly insecure. This feeling of not being able to go up or down was enough to drive him mad, and his hatred towards Su Ming seeped into his bones. As the old man hesitated and instinctively chased after Su Ming, Su Ming had already widened the distance between him and the old man by more than 500,000 feet in the high wind. With this distance, he could descend at ease and charge forward while stirring up rumbling sounds in the air. This cycle continued for another 2 days. Soon, the ground beneath them was no longer gray, but green. It was clear that they were gradually approaching the place where the shaman tribe resided from a desolate and uninhabited place. Only at that moment did the old man finally make his decision. He gritted his teeth and came to an abrupt halt. He stared at Su Ming, who was hundreds of thousands of feet away. Hatred shone in his eyes, but he turned around and gave up on chasing after him. Instead, he charged back the way he had come. In the end, he still chose to give up. After all, this sort of pursuit would not bring him any results. Besides, he had also weighed his options. In this sort of dilemma, unless he reached the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm and obtained an even stronger divine ability, then perhaps he would have a chance of killing Su Ming before he executed the power of the god of Berserkers. But now he couldn't do it. Rather than continuing to chase like this, he might as well give up decisively. Yet not long after the old man chose to give up and go back the way he came, he discovered with a dark expression that Su Ming was no longer leaving. Instead, he was following behind him, as if he was the one chasing after him. But that was not all. He could have just ignored Su Ming and let him follow him. He was certain that Su Ming would not dare return to Sky Mist City. If he continued following him like this, then before long, he would leave on his own. Besides, if he followed him for a long period of time, then perhaps he would have a chance to obtain the power of the god of berserkers. To the old man, this could be considered as a good thing, if he did not count the booming sounds behind him, which could be heard even if he was very far away. Su Ming's actions were accompanied by the loud, booming sounds he intentionally created. Those were the sounds of things breaking apart and the booming sounds that came from punching the air. Those sounds reverberated continuously in the sky. This was the land of the shamans, and there was some distance between them and Sky Mist City. If the old berserker was careful, then it was not impossible for him to return quietly. However, if there were booming sounds continuously behind him, then it would be difficult for him to return safely. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! The old berserker felt as if he was about to go mad. He had already given up on chasing after Su Ming, but this person still did not know what was good for him. Instead, he stuck to him as if he was glued to him, causing the old man's heart to pound in fear on his way back. The booming sounds grew louder. If he did not stop Su Ming, then the old man did not want to know what would happen to him. It was especially so for the past few days. Due to him chasing after Su Ming, these booming sounds had already appeared in this region, and it might have already caught the attention of the shamans. Now that he was returning, this was happening again. If no shamans came to check on him, then even the old man himself would not believe it. Not only did the old man go mad, he also felt a headache coming on. He decided that he might as well stop once again and change his direction to continue chasing after Su Ming. Yet as he changed his direction, Su Ming also did the same in the distance. The two of them turned into a chase once again. The only thing that did not change was the booming sounds. They still existed and did not disappear. Those booming sounds were like noise that made the old man feel incredibly annoyed and apprehensive. Even if he was chasing after Su Ming, he would still observe his surroundings with extreme caution, afraid that he would attract the attention of the shamans. This sort of mentality was similar to when he originally wanted to walk quietly in the middle of the night and not be discovered by anyone, but there were always loud sounds around him. The old man's eyes turned bloodshot. This was the first time he felt fear toward a person in the bone sacrifice realm. That feeling was not because of the power of the god of berserkers, but because of Su Ming's actions. This action of his made him want to tear off his hair. After chasing for a long time, the old man was so depressed that he wanted to roar. However, he forcefully suppressed the urge to do so. He turned around and once again gave up on the chase. Instead, he charged toward Heavenly Mist City at full speed. Su Ming changed his direction unhurriedly and followed behind him, letting out booming sounds that shook the sky and earth. If he was fast, then Su Ming would be fast. If he was slow, then Su Ming would be slow. If he stopped, then Su Ming would naturally stop as well. There would always be several hundreds of thousands of feet between them. I don't believe that you'll be able to deal with this if the shamans come here. You're just a berserker in the bone sacrifice realm, and if you're not afraid, then why should I be? The old man's eyes were bloodshot. He was truly at his wit's end because of Su Ming. At that moment, he might as well not think too much about it, and just charge forward with his head lowered, as if he was pouring all his gloom and frustration into speed. No matter how one looked at it, it looked as if Su Ming was chasing after the old man, but the great difference between their levels of cultivation caused this action to look incredibly bizarre. A berserker in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm was chasing after a berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm. This pursuit continued for 3 days, and due to Su Ming's incessant rumbles, he finally caught the attention of the shamans in the land of the shamans. In truth, most of the shamans in this area had already gone to the battlefield. That was why Su Ming and the old man were not stopped during this period of time. However, the group of shamans from the battlefield did not return. What caught the attention of Su Ming and the old man was a new batch of warriors from the land of the shamans who were heading to the battlefield in Sky Mist City. More accurately speaking, this was a migrating tribe. The warriors in the tribe had formed teams to protect the tribe as they moved forward. Once the tribe reached the designated location, they would split up a large group of people and head to the gathering spot of the shamans outside Sky Mist City. There were plenty of migrating tribes in the land of the shamans. The tribe Su Ming and the old berserker ran into was one of them. It was a group of black shadows that seemed to cover the sky. They were packed densely together, and there were no less than thousands of them. Each black shadow was a mackerel pike that had shrunk down greatly. The mackerel pike swam in the sea of clouds, and on each of their backs stood a shaman warrior. As the ground trembled, thousands of shamans moved forward to protect 9 ferocious beasts that were tens of thousands of feet big. They looked like turtles, but their shells were square and flat. There were a large number of shamans sitting on the backs of the 9 strange turtles. There were also some buildings that looked as if they had been uprooted and placed on top of them. Dust was flying in the air behind them, and there was a long line that could not be seen. This was clearly not a small tribe migrating. This was a rather large shaman tribe that was of a certain scale. There would definitely be powerful ladder shamans in this sort of tribe. Almost at the instant Su Ming and the old berserker started chasing after Su Ming and the old berserker, they noticed the shamans that blotted out the sky and earth appearing in the distance. At the same time, the shamans also saw Su Ming and the old berserker standing at the end of the world. In truth, when it came to Su Ming and the old berserker, the group of shamans first heard the booming sounds before they saw it with their own eyes. Almost all of them saw the old berserker at first glance, which was why this person's power was so great, because he did not hide his face, and because to the shamans, he was a berserker. It was also because he was running away. Fleeing in the land of the shamans was a very logical thing, and it was also logical that the people who were chasing after him would definitely be enemies with him. And in the land of the shamans, those who were enemies with him were practically all shamans. Besides, Su Ming wore a bamboo hat on his head, and he brought out a spirit plunder almost the instant he noticed the shamans with his divine sense. He did not surround himself with it, but held it in his palm. Even so, the unique dark light and suction force that belonged to spirit plunder still spread out, causing the air around Su Ming to look as if it was distorting. At first glance, it was rather similar to when Su Ming had run into the young soul catcher. Su Ming's voice was also slightly hoarse, and there was a ghastly tone to it. "My fellow tribesmen, which tribe are you from? I am Lizard Shaman Tribe's medial soul catcher, Emo Su. Please help me kill this person. This person is a powerful berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm." The moment the old berserker who seemed to be running away heard those words, he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. As he ran, he did not have time to speak. As he fled, he started cursing in his heart. "Do you think those shamans are blind? Medial soul catcher. Huh?" The voice in his heart was suddenly stuck in his throat. The 4th chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 386. As Su Ming spoke, a shaman crystal appeared in his left hand. He squeezed it, and the shaman crystal instantly shone with a powerful light. That light shone above Su Ming and turned into a gigantic lizard. That lizard was the sacred beast of the lizard shaman tribe. There were many uses for shaman crystals. Su Ming had learned from Wu Duo that one of them was a form of etiquette for shamans to reveal their tribe's sacred beast when they ran into each other in unfamiliar places. In the end, Su Ming chose not to delve into Wu Duo's origins when he got to know him, but he did ask quite a number of questions regarding the shaman tribe's customs and characteristics. Wu Duo told him everything, and he could vaguely guess Su Ming's thoughts, but he did not expose him. Instead, he treated him as a kindred spirit of a different tribe. They might not have a deep relationship, but after fighting together several times, they slowly formed a special sort of tacit understanding, and with that tacit understanding, they formed a friendship between different tribes. Perhaps it was very fragile, but perhaps it was not. At the very least, Su Ming was using the method Wu Duo had told him to activate the power within the shaman crystal. Once he manifested the image of the sacred beast from lizard shaman tribe he had seen in the past, a gigantic ferocious beast that was also manifested from the power of the shaman crystal appeared in the sky from the shaman tribe that had stirred up a storm of dust and covered the sky and earth. It was a gigantic mackerel pike that Su Ming was familiar with and had seen before. Compared to the shadow of the mackerel pike in the sky, the lizard dragon was simply too insignificant. However, if this tribe could manifest the shadow of their sacred beast, then it meant that they acknowledged Su Ming's words and acknowledged Su Ming's shaman tribe's etiquette, which was why they returned the greeting. This sudden scene made the fleeing old berserker widen his eyes in disbelief. He did not know about the shaman tribe's etiquette. In truth, there were not many people who knew about this etiquette in the land of berserkers, because it was simply too insignificant. Even if they could manifest a sacred beast, those who were not shamans would usually be able to tell with just one glance. The most obvious thing about it was the strength of their minds. At that moment, Su Ming had already spread his divine sense to cover his entire body. With the strange properties of spirit plunder in his palm, which no one else could see, it caused him to look as if he was trying to captivate people's souls, even though he was wearing a bamboo hat. The old berserker might not know this etiquette, but he knew that Su Ming was definitely not shaman. At that moment, when the group of shamans appeared behind him, his skin crawled, but he still spat out those malicious words as he fled. Interesting. You are the berserker's true divinity, Wind Berserker, the scion of the first god of berserkers. When did you become a shaman? Why didn't I know about it? Almost the moment the old man said those words, Su Ming let out a cold harumph. He did not explain anything, but instead let go of his right hand, causing the spirit plunder in his palm to float above his head and let out a powerful dark light, as if it could absorb all matter into it. Su Ming remembered clearly that the young soul catcher he killed in the land of berserkers had once seen this pearl and said that this was a soul catcher pearl that only shamans could refine. This pearl seemed to be rather famous in the shaman tribe. Besides, Su Ming also remembered that when he brought out spirit plunder in lizard shaman tribe, the patriarch of the lizard shaman tribe had also recognized that this item belonged to the shaman tribe and was surprised as to how Su Ming could possess it and use it. Soul catcher pearl. It was just as Su Ming had expected. The instant the pearl appeared, someone from the migrating shaman tribe behind him immediately cried out in surprise. The old berserker was momentarily stunned. At that moment, an old woman walked out from among the thousands of mackerel pikes in the sky behind Su Ming. That old woman's hair was white and her skin was covered in wrinkles. There was a tattoo of a mackerel pike on her face, and she held a staff made of fish bones in her hands. With one step, she appeared before Su Ming, several tens of thousands of feet behind the old berserker. She was a ladder shaman. Su Ming's pupils shrank. He wore a bamboo hat. And the instant the old woman walked past him, he felt a power that was similar to a divine sense spreading out from the old woman's body and sweeping past his body. At the same time the old woman appeared, there was a man sitting cross-legged on the head of the turtle in the middle of the 9 strange turtles on the ground. His hair was about 10 feet long. The man looked to be in his 40s, but his skin was covered in spots that belonged to an old man. His eyes were originally closed, but as he opened them slowly, a terrifying light shone within them. It was just one gaze, but it made Su Ming's entire body tremble, and the old berserker who was charging forward felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. His body came to an abrupt halt, as if he had been bound and could not move forward. Soul catcher. And shaman. The old berserker's expression turned incredibly sour. He could not move his body, and he felt as if his soul was being taken away. Not only that, his body was also no longer under his control. He slowly turned around, and like a puppet, he walked towards the incoming old woman. However, his eyes were clearly filled with terror and astonishment. Take off your bamboo hat. The old berserker did not have any strength to fight back, as if his body was being controlled, and the man sitting on the turtle's body on the ground cast his gaze on Su Ming. His eyes were profound, and his voice was filled with a strange rhythm. Su Ming immediately felt a grate while coming towards him from the man's eyes. In an instant, it touched the divine sense he had spread out and turned into a wave of impact, causing Su Ming to stagger, but the man's will immediately retracted and did not injure him. A thought appeared in Su Ming's head, and he slowly took off the bamboo hat, revealing a face covered by a black mask under the bamboo hat. That mask belonged to Han Mountain's ancestor. He might be wearing a mask, but Su Ming's eyes were still as profound as ever. The unique presence he gained after he sacrificed himself to the bone sacrifice realm was also present clearly on his body, even though he did not reveal his true face. That profound gaze, the floating spirit plunder, and the divine sense surrounding his body caused Su Ming to look as if he was truly a medial soul catcher. At first glance, his presence was somewhat similar to that of the man on the turtle's body. This was similar to a soul catcher. Even if the old berserker's body was being controlled, when he saw Su Ming's current appearance, even though his heart was filled with fear, he still could not help but have a misconception. Could it be that he's truly a soul catcher? Interesting. I can sense berserker, shaman, and immortal from you. The man with long hair that was 10 feet long was incredibly handsome. Even the spots that belonged to an old man did not destroy his handsomeness. Instead, they made him look even more ancient and charming. You're the first person I can't tell which race you belong to at first glance. You're very similar to a soul catcher. In fact, if it was any other shaman, they would think you're a soul catcher, but you aren't a soul catcher. Take off your mask. The man shook his head slightly and spoke languidly. Su Ming's heart pounded against his chest. As the man's words echoed in his ears, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he made a bold move. Han Mountain Bell was within his body, and within Han Mountain Bell was the strange rod snake. That rod snake had been released by Su Ming during the previous battle in the battlefield, and it had even pierced through the old berserker's palm. Su Ming remembered clearly that this snake had devoured the young soul catcher and turned into an illusory candle dragon once he opened his eyes. The instant it devoured the young soul catcher, Su Ming could clearly feel the rod snake's excitement and desire. Su Ming did not take off his mask. Instead, he placed all his attention on the black stone fragment hanging from his neck. This was his final resort. He could enter that strange dimension to escape from all dangers. However, there was also a drawback to this. This was Su Ming's greatest secret, and unless he absolutely had to, he did not want to use it. At the same time, once he was ready to activate the stone fragment, Su Ming opened a gap on Han Mountain Bell in his body and released the strange rod snake's presence from within. That presence instantly filled Su Ming's entire body. However, that presence was clearly very weak, and there were not many people who could notice it. Only the ferocious beast's instincts would be able to notice it, and only some people with special senses would be able to sense it. Almost the instant that presence spread out from Su Ming's body, all the pikes in the sky let out piercing screeches and retreated simultaneously. Terror appeared on their faces, as if they had sensed something terrifying. They were not the only ones. The ferocious beasts on the ground were also in the same state. Even the 900,000 feet tall tortoise beasts were violently trembling. 8 of them let out roars. Those roars did not seem like they were facing off against each other. Instead, it seemed like they were frightened. As for the long-haired man, the turtle he was on did not roar, but its body was trembling nonstop. The long-haired man was momentarily stunned before his eyes went wide. A dark light shone within them as he stared at Su Ming. Gradually, his expression changed. Candle Dragon, I am a medial soul catcher from Lizard Shaman tribe. I travel in the land of the shamans. From the moment I was born, I possess the Candle Dragon's presence. As a soul catcher, you should be able to tell whether this presence is real or fake. I didn't take off my mask because of my personal reasons. Please don't make things difficult for me, Senior. Su Ming spoke slowly and calmly. During the time he spent spreading out the rod snake's presence and speaking, he had already completed the activation of the stone fragment's dimension and could step inside at any moment. Uproars came from all around. As the ferocious beasts roared, the shamans on them looked at Su Ming differently. To them, besides the mask, Su Ming's entire body, including his eyes, was exactly the same as the terrifying soul-catcher shamans they had seen before. In fact, there were even some soul-catchers among the crowd on the ground who had the same feeling. The long-haired man looked at Su Ming for a moment before he spoke languidly. Tribe member from Lizard Shaman Tribe. Now is the time of war. Don't leave. Join Autumn Sea Tribe and become our tribe's soul catcher. Su Ming frowned. All right, but you have to give this person to me. I want to turn him into a puppet and grant him an undying body. 3 days and 15 nights, but he still isn't as mighty as you. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 387. I didn't dare to ask for monthly votes to be exchanged for more updates. After learning a painful lesson, these 3 days felt like a year. Fellow Taoists and Taoists, I'm really scared. I can't catch up with your votes, even if I update 15 times in 3 days. I'm trying my best to catch up with you, but I still can't catch up. There's still one last day before the end of this month. I'll continue to chase and chase. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 388. Autumn Sea Tribe was one of the bigger tribes in the land of the shamans. These people who were migrating were just a part of it. The team was so long that it looked like they were connected together from a distance. They were packed densely together, and there were a large number of gigantic, ferocious beasts dragging the unique buildings and the people from Autumn Sea Tribe forward slowly. There were thousands of mackerel pikes swimming in the sky, and they looked as if they had covered the sky. Whistling sounds reverberated in the air, and quite a number of these mackerel pikes spread out as if they were patrolling the area. Su Ming was sitting cross-legged on a turtle that was 100,000 feet tall. There were 9 members of Autumn Sea Tribe sitting around him. These 9 people had extraordinary power, and all of them were medial shamans. They surrounded Su Ming as if they were surrounding him. This was the male in shaman's order. There was a person lying beside Su Ming, and that person was the old berserker. He could not move, but his mind was clear. His heart was filled with shock toward what he had seen just now. He originally did not believe that Su Ming was a soul catcher, but the way things had developed made him doubt it. Even now, he still could not tell just who Su Ming was. Su Ming remained silent along the way. He sat down cross-legged with a calm expression on his face, not revealing a single hint of his thoughts. The turtle he was on was the second of the 9, and the first turtle before him was the male in shaman's mount. From his position, Su Ming could see the long-haired man who had his back turned towards him on the first turtle in the distance. This person's hair was so long that Su Ming had never seen it before, and he was also the first shaman he had ever seen. When Su Ming remembered that shamans were equivalent to berserkers in the realm, his pupils shrank. How many shamans are there in the shaman tribe? I don't think there are many. It's just like how there are very few berserkers who have attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. Su Ming knew very little about shamans and berserkers who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. This was too far away from him. With just one gaze, he could make a berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm almost break down and surrender. The strength of an shaman might be the strongest force in the entire land of South Morning. Shaman. I wonder what his name is, but he must be someone famous in both the shaman and berserker tribes. Su Ming remained unperturbed as he sized up his surroundings. The tribe's migration speed was not fast. When dusk arrived, the migration team gradually came to a stop on this desolate land. The members of Autumn Sea Tribe skillfully set up tents made of animal skin and started bonfires. Everything was orderly, and there was not a hint of chaos. It was as if everyone knew what they had to do. When dusk ended and the sky turned dark, the bonfires lit up the area. As a temporary resting place for the tribe, the area was still very big. At the very least, When Su Ming stood there and looked into the distance, he could only vaguely see the end of the place, but he could not tell just how big the temporary tribe was. The moon gradually peeked through the clouds in the sky. As the light from the bonfire shone on the ground, even though it was dark in the distance, it was relatively bright in the tribe. Some of the children were playing with each other, and occasionally, sound of laughter could be heard. Gradually, as the members of Autumn's Sea Tribe brought out their food, and some of the tribe members started roasting meat over bonfires, the fragrance of food spread out, and the entire temporary tribe started bustling with noise. Su Ming sat by the bonfire and watched all of this. If he did not look at the tattoos, he would even have the misconception that he was not in the land of the shamans, but in the land of the berserkers. It did not matter whether it was their diet or their living habits. Everything about these two tribes was too similar, besides the difference in their divine abilities and arts. As Su Ming was in a daze, he saw 3 children about 7 or 8 years old on the other side of the bonfire, not too far away. They were dressed in animal skins, and their hair was a little messy. They were playing and chasing each other. One of the children had big eyes and a pinkish face, which made him look incredibly adorable. That child was running in front, and his laughter was filled with joy. His 2 companions were chasing after him. "You two are too slow. I'll count to 3. If you still can't catch up to me, then I won't let you play with this ASU drum anymore." The child running in front held a small round drum in his hand. There was a handle attached to it, and he held it in his hand. However, the ground was not flat. When he turned his head around to speak, he tripped and instantly fell. When he fell, his 2 companions immediately caught up to him, and the 3 of them immediately started playing with each other on the ground. Yet as the 3 of them played around, sounds of argument traveled into Su Ming's ears, causing him to look towards the source of the argument. "It's all your fault. You broke the ASU drum. It's all your fault. My papa made this for me. You have to keep me company." The child who had fallen previously had his head lowered, and he looked as if he was about to cry. There was a crack in the small drum he had been holding in his hand. The other 2 children before him had looks of indignation and anger on their faces, and they started arguing. This sort of thing would occasionally happen between children. Most of the shamans around them turned a blind eye to it. Compared to the innocence of the children, the hearts of the adults in the shaman tribe were heavy, because before long, they would have to join the war. Perhaps very few of them would be able to survive in the end. Su Ming looked at the 3 children, then at the small bone in one of their hands. He stood up slowly, and the instant he did so, the 9 medial shamans surrounding him immediately turned their gazes towards him, and wariness appeared in their eyes. Su Ming did not pay any attention to the 9 people's gazes. Instead, he walked towards the 3 children who were arguing. The 9 medial shamans frowned at Su Ming's actions. One of the medial shamans who was standing between Su Ming and the 3 children stood up when Su Ming walked over and stared at him. Just as he was about to speak, his vision suddenly blurred, and when his vision cleared up, Su Ming's figure had already disappeared. That person was momentarily stunned before he turned his head around swiftly. With one glance, he saw Su Ming walking towards the 3 children with his back turned towards him. As that person's expression changed, the other 8 shamans also reacted the same way. Just as they were about to close in on Su Ming, they saw that he had already arrived beside the 3 children. He stopped and crouched down. "Let me take a look at it. Perhaps I can help you fix it." Su Ming wore a mask, but the gentleness in his eyes and the gentleness in his words was still visible. The 3 children were momentarily stunned before they widened their eyes and looked at Su Ming. "Uncle, can you fix the Aso drum?" "Yeah, my papa made this for me. It's his fault for breaking it." "Uncle, please fix it. It's my fault I broke it." The 9 medial shamans who were closing in on Su Ming froze in their tracks. They had heard Su Ming's words and seen his actions. Su Ming took the small drum from the child's hands and cast it a few glances. At that instant, nostalgia appeared in his eyes. The similarities between the shaman and berserker tribes caused the children's toys to be practically the same. Take the Aso drum, for example. Su Ming remembered that his elder had made it for him when he was young. This was a small drum made from bee skin. There were small stones tied to straw ropes on both sides of the drum. When one held the handle and turned it, the small stones tied to the straw ropes would hit the surface of the drum, creating a rippling sound. This was one of Su Ming's favorite toys when he was young. He looked at the drum in his hands, and a smile appeared on his face under the mask. One side of the bone was broken. That was why he could not make any sound when he hit the drum. Su Ming lifted his hand and tore off the torn bee's skin, then tore off a corner of the child's clothes and placed it on the surface of the drum. Once he fixed it in place, he turned the drum, and immediately, the rippling sounds immediately traveled forth. The three children immediately started cheering, and excitement appeared on their faces. Once they received the repaired small drums from Su Ming, they quickly looked at each other, then ran into the distance with excitement in their eyes. "Uncle, thank you. I'm Abu." The child who had previously broken the small drum waved at Su Ming and ran off happily with his companions. At that moment, Su Ming was not bothered by the blood feud between the shamans and the berserkers of the land of South Mourning. Neither was he bothered by the fact that both sides were engaged in a war that would last for an unknown number of years under Sky Mist City. He looked at the naive child and sighed softly in his heart. "I didn't expect you to repair the Osso drum for these children, Brother Amo. You must be seeing your past self in them, right?" A cheerful voice came from behind Su Ming. The person who spoke was a young man dressed in a black robe. He had long hair that reached his waist. His skin was fair, and there was a tattoo of a mackerel pike at the center of his brows. His appearance was slightly different from the other shamans. After all, the tattoo of a shaman was usually on the entire face, but this person only had one at the center of his brows. The other parts of his body did not seem to have a single tattoo. He walked over from the distance. As he got closer, the 9 medial shamans who were keeping an eye on Su Ming became respectful. When the young man waved his hand, the 9 of them retreated. The past is no longer here. Su Ming turned around and looked at the young man flatly. The past may not be here, but you must grasp the present, because your actions now will determine your future. The young man smiled faintly and looked at Su Ming as well. At that moment, their gazes met. "Yamu of Autumn Sea Tribe, medial soul catcher," the young man said with a smile, and averted his gaze from Su Ming before sitting down by the bonfire. "Brother Amo, do you want a drink?" As the young man spoke, someone immediately took a few brisk steps forward and placed 2 pots of wine by his side before leaving respectfully. Su Ming sat down by the young man's side and shook his head. The young man picked up one of the pots and took a big swig once he opened it, then let out a long breath. "Brother Amo, you came from the battlefield, right?" The young man put down the pot of wine and spoke in a seemingly casual manner. "Why do you say that?" Su Ming asked calmly. "You have a scent of shaman blood on you. There must be a lot of shamans who died in the hands of you, the true divinity, Wind Berserker." The young man's voice was calm, but when he said those words, it was like a wave of cold air pressing down on Su Ming in the lively tribe. The continuous 3 days of explosiveness caused my thoughts to wither up. Today, when I sat in front of the computer, I felt as if I could not write a single word. This feeling hasn't appeared many times since I started writing, but it's a signal. I know that if I continue exploding and force myself to write, then the consequences will be severe. It's not because of my body, but the collapse of a plot. I broke my promise. I didn't explode. Perhaps some readers think that the explosiveness of the past few days is because I'm saving up my chapters, but I can swear on my life that there are 15 chapters in 3 days, and not a single word is because I'm saving up my chapters. Because I realize that I can't save up my chapters at all. I only have 3 chapters today, and the last chapter is the usual one at the end of the month. I will still write the chapters that I broke my promise for this month. I calculated the number of chapters one wrote this month, and with the 3 chapters one wrote today, I will have 82 chapters. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 389. Su Ming remained calm. Not a single hint of change appeared on his face because of the young man's words. It was as if he did not hear anything. "Perhaps I should call you Brother Su, and not Brother Mo, the young man said slowly when he saw Su Ming's reaction. Su Ming smiled faintly and lifted his head to look at the mackerel pikes swimming about in the dark sky. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he took off the mask on his face. Once he placed it by the side, he picked up the pot of wine and took a big swig from it. The instant he took off his mask, the 9 medial shamans who had retreated previously immediately took a few steps forward and stood around him. Their expressions changed, and killing intent appeared in their eyes, but they did not attack. The young man's gaze immediately turned as sharp as lightning towards Su Ming's sudden action. He stared at Su Ming's fair face and the scar under his eyes for a long time before he let out a cold harumph. You've killed so many of us shamans, and the shaman blood on your body is so thick that even if you're far away, you'll still be able to sense it, and you still dare to sit in Autumn Sea tribe like this? Su Ming, how dare you? Do you believe that with just one word from me, your head will immediately fall to the ground and your soul will scatter? Do you believe that before my head falls to the ground, you will die with it? Do you believe that once my head falls to the ground, Autumn Sea tribe will also have a hard time moving forward in the land of berserkers? Su Ming picked up the pot of wine and took another sip before he cast the young man a flat look. Do you believe that perhaps my head won't fall to the ground? The young man stared at Su Ming, and after some time, he suddenly laughed. His laughter was not loud, but the moment it appeared, the chill in his eyes disappeared. Su Ming, oh Su Ming, this is the first time we met, and you've given me a lot of surprises. I didn't expect that as a berserker, you would repair the Su drum for the children of the shaman tribe. I also didn't expect that once I revealed your identity, you would dare to threaten me in Autumn Sea tribe. Do you know that your name has already started circulating among the berserkers? Even if Sky Mist City has given a gag order, the things that happen on the battlefield cannot be hidden. True divinity wind berserker, true divinity lightning berserker, you even obtained part of the first god of berserkers' legacy. You, who possesses the power of the god of berserkers, have already entered the eyes of all the powerful berserkers in the land of berserkers. At the same time, he has also entered the eyes of many experts of the sorcerer tribe. Su Ming did not speak. He continued drinking. At the instant his identity was pointed out, his heart had indeed been shaken, but he soon calmed down. There were plenty of things that could not be explained, such as why he was left in the tribe, and there was simply no need for this person to say these things to him. However, once the young man said these words, Su Ming had a vague understanding of what he meant. I've always been curious. When I left Sky Mist City that day, why was it that only one shaman and one berserker chased after me, and why I didn't run into any other shamans on the way? Instead, I just so happened to run into all of you in the end. Su Ming put down the pot of wine and looked at the young man before him as he spoke languidly. Thank you for this matter. The young man's pupils shrank. After a long time, he shook his head and sighed. How boring. I thought your expression would change slightly and you would do something drastic, but you remained so calm right from the start. That's right, there were members of Autumn Sea tribe on the battlefield, and the Sacred Lady was also there. She was the one who attacked you in secret when you left. Once she gave you a chance to escape, she stopped the powerful shamans from the other tribes from chasing after you. There were also people who helped you in secret in Sky Mist City, causing only 2 people to chase after you in the end. You ran into us because the thought soothsayers in Autumn Sea tribe predicted it. You can say that you didn't run into us, but we were the ones waiting for you. The young man spoke slowly as he looked at Su Ming. Su Ming fell silent. After some time, the young man frowned and asked, Do you know the reason? The reason is because you are the Shaman Lord's junior brother. The person who said those words was not the young man, but a hoarse voice. That voice came from an old woman walking towards them slowly, not too far away. That old woman was the latter shaman from Autumn Sea tribe Su Ming saw during the day. Once the old woman appeared, the 9 medial shamans around them immediately knelt down on one knee. Extreme respect and fanaticism appeared on their faces. Even the young man beside Su Ming, Yamu, immediately stood up and bowed towards her respectfully. A long time ago, before the land of the Berserkers was divided into 5 parts, there was a powerful tribe in the south. The leader of that tribe was so strong that he was on equal footing with the second god of Berserkers at that time. That tribe was known as Nine Li. There is no way to find out what happened between the leader of Nine Li and the second god of Berserkers during that period of time. Our descendants only know that when the second god of Berserkers was harmed by the immortals of the other worlds and was torn to pieces, causing the land of the Berserkers to be reduced to nothing, Nine Li tribe also fell apart. The leader of Nine Li died, and before he died, he left behind a will to change the name of the Berserkers to the Shamans. A large portion of them gradually multiplied in the land of South Morning and turned into various small tribes. They were known as shamans, and they were the current shamans. We shamans are the descendants of Nine Li tribe. We maintain the blood of Nine Li and wait for the blood of the shaman lord to awaken time and time again so that we can obtain the power that belongs to Nine Li. However, as time passed and we waited for the blood of the shaman lord to awaken, a portion of the shaman tribe changed. They gave up on the glory of Nine Li and came into contact with the immortals of the other worlds who descended from beyond the sky. They are no longer shamans. They are no longer worthy to be called shamans that the world cannot bend to. They're the dogs of the immortals of the other worlds. And we saved you because your eldest senior brother is the current shaman lord of Nine Li. He arranged for one of the 300 shaman souls of Nine Li to stay by your side. You are now an honored guest of Nine Li shaman tribe. The old woman's ancient voice echoed in Su Ming's ears. When he heard her words, his heart trembled. He lowered his head and looked at the bracelet on his wrist. With a single thought, the bracelet immediately turned into black smoke. In an instant, that black smoke spread out and gathered into the figure of a woman before him. The woman gradually gained physical form, and when she was completely revealed, she had her back turned towards Su Ming as she swept her gaze past the old woman and the area around her. Which tribe of Nine Li shaman tribe are you from? The woman spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold, and there was a freezing chill in it. Autumn Sea tribe. The instant the old woman saw the woman, excitement appeared on her face. She wrapped her fist in her palm and bowed towards her. She was not the only one. All the shamans in the area immediately knelt down and worshipped her. The young master has ordered all the tribes belonging to Nine Li shaman tribe to provide the greatest amount of help to the people he wants before the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands arrives. I have already sent this news to the shamans during the previous battle, but almost none of them have the blood of Nine Li flowing through their veins. The immortals of the other worlds have descended 3 times during the past 100 years. Each time they descended, a tribe that betrayed their tribe would belong to them. To obtain the art of immortality, they would offer up their blood. It is especially so now that the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands is approaching. The ancient legends are starting to show some signs, and more Nine Li shaman tribe are giving up on their blood and becoming the subordinates of the immortals of the other worlds. The war this time was started by the tribes affiliated to the immortals of the other worlds. If we and the few of us who still insist on keeping the blood of Nine Li flowing through our veins do not obey them and send out our soldiers, then we will face the danger of our entire tribe being destroyed. Young master, please return and lead us down the path of Nine Li. The old woman's face was filled with excitement, and she knelt down and worshipped him. Su Ming's breathing quickened. He suddenly realized that the originally noisy Autumn Sea tribe in the area where he was located had fallen silent. There might not be anyone looking in their direction because they were located in the distance, but Su Ming could feel that this area had become the center of attention for all the people in Autumn Sea tribe. There's less than 3 years left before the immortals from the other worlds descend for the 4th time within 100 years. Once they descend this time, there might be even more Nine Li shaman tribe who will choose to attach themselves to them. After all, the temptation of breaking through the end realm is something that no end shaman can resist. The great patriarch's choice in the past let everyone see just how powerful space is. Based on what we've sensed, even the immortals from the other worlds have descended 3 times within the past 100 years. There must be quite a number of berserkers who have come into contact with them. In fact, we even suspect that Sky Mist City no longer belongs to the Berserker tribe. The old woman's voice was filled with urgency, as if she wanted to use this chance to tell everything she knew to their shaman lord through the shaman soul of Nine Li. Su Ming sucked in a sharp breath. The old woman's words made his heart tremble violently when he heard them. Sky Mist City is still fighting against the shamans affiliated to the immortals from the other worlds, because we suspect that there are 2 or 3 different forces of power from the immortals from the other worlds. Shaman Lord, what should we do? The old woman asked quickly. The woman formed by the black smoke was still silent. Su Ming was also silent. He suddenly had a feeling that Autumn Sea Tribe had saved him in secret and made him stay in the tribe not because of him, but because of his chance to speak to his eldest senior brother. When he thought of his eldest senior brother, Su Ming could not help but think of his master. Just as the Nine Li shaman soul, formed by the black smoke, was silent for a moment, a calm voice suddenly floated towards them from the distance. There was an indescribable rhythm to that voice. It was pleasant to the ears, but at the same time, it also seemed to possess a feeling that could intimidate souls. As it reverberated in the air, all those who heard it could not help but feel their heads buzz. Even the Nine Li shaman soul, his eldest senior brother, had given him looked as if it was about to scatter under that voice. Tell the shaman lord that if he still hasn't made his choice, then I, Zhongzhe, am nearing the end of my life. I will choose to give up on my blood in exchange for a chance to break out of this end realm. If I succeed, if I am no longer me. The voice paused for a moment before it turned into a sigh. Su Ming knew who that voice belonged to. That person was the End Soul Catcher. It was the last day. The ranking for the monthly votes might still be the same, but I am very grateful to all my fellow Taoists for the number of monthly votes. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to gain rewards for my explosiveness. There was still one more night until midnight. After that, it would be August. August was a hot month. During this month, I would be even more serious. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 390. As the End Soul Catcher sighed, the entire Autumn Sea Tribe's temporary tribe fell into dead silence. Time trickled by slowly. That deathly stillness turned into an oppressive feeling that fell heavily on all the people's hearts, including Su Ming's. Su Ming had thought about his eldest senior brother's origins more than once, but only now did he truly understand his eldest senior brother's identity. The Lord of Nine Li Shaman Tribe. Just as that oppressive feeling grew stronger, suddenly, ripples spread out from the female Nine Li shaman soul formed by the black smoke. Soon after, a voice Su Ming was familiar with traveled through the distance, as if it had traveled through those ripples. Before the immortals from the other worlds descend for the 4th time, I will come. The instant that voice appeared, almost all the people in Autumn Sea Tribe heard it clearly, and all of them knelt down. Even the mackerel pikes in the sky let out roars when those words reverberated in the air, causing the dark sky to look as if it had turned into a black sea that was tumbling and roaring. We greet the Lord of Nine Li. The waves of sound fused together and turned into one voice. That voice only slowly disappeared after a long while. Youngest junior brother, don't return to the land of berserkers for the time being. Su Ming's eldest senior brother's voice traveled out from the female Nine Li shaman soul's body. Once he finished saying those words, his voice gradually disappeared. The female Nine Li shaman soul's body also dissipated and returned to Su Ming's wrist, turning back into the bracelet once again. However, that bracelet had become much duller. Clearly, this sort of conversation, even if it was just 2 sentences, was not something simple. At that moment, the shamans around him gradually stood up from their kneeling positions. Once the old woman cast Su Ming a glance, she no longer bothered herself with him. Instead, she turned around and left, as if she had come here, just as Su Ming had guessed. It was just for this conversation with the shaman lord of Nine Li. As for the 9 medial shamans who had been by Su Ming's side since the beginning, They also seemed to have received a new order. At that moment, they retreated and left, no longer bothering themselves with Su Ming. Only Yamu smiled at Su Ming and stayed by his side. He picked up his pot of wine and took a big swig from it. "All right, the old fellows have all left. There's no one here to restrain you. Brother Su, you can leave at any time. If you don't want to leave, it's even better if you stay. The immortals from the other worlds have descended. What is going on?" Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he picked up the pot of wine and took a sip from it. Then, he looked towards Yamu. "Naturally, it's the immortals from the other worlds. They used a special method to come to our world. The immortal spells are different from ours, and all those who descend here have unfathomable levels of cultivation. In fact, they even have a way for powerful warriors in End Realm to break through their own levels of cultivation and step in a Void Realm. It can also be said that they have the power to let the old monsters who have attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm reach another realm. To those old monsters, this is an irresistible temptation. Especially as time passes and their lifespans come to an end, the power of the heavens and earth that is stirred up when they make a breakthrough can transform their lives to something similar to immortality. Not to mention them, even I desire such a temptation. Yamu shrugged his shoulders and said emotionally, "You've seen immortals before?" Su Ming suddenly asked. A glint appeared in Yamu's eyes, and he answered in a low voice. "I've seen two immortals before. One was a man, and the other was a woman. The man was an old man. He came to Autumn Sea Tribe 10 years ago and fought against Sir Zhongzhe." Su Ming immediately focused his attention and listened carefully to Yamu's words. "I can't see the details of that battle, but their battle lasted for less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. I couldn't see how they attacked in the sky, but I only saw a gigantic hand appear in the sky. That hand clenched its fist and opened it, then it moved 9 times. After those 9 times, his battle against Sir Zhongzhe ended. I saw the old man walk out of the sky dressed in incredibly grand robes and leave without a single word. That's right, there were some pictures embroidered on the old man's robes. It was a purple dragon, and there were 4 items in the dragon's claws. One of them was a bottle, one of them was a pearl, one of them was a small sword, and the last one was hidden in the clouds in the picture, so I couldn't see it. Once the old man left, Sir Zhongzhe appeared in the sky and returned to the tribe. I remember that his face was incredibly dark at that time. We were all guessing that perhaps... Yamu sighed and took a big swig from his pot of wine. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he continued asking, "What about the other one?" The other one was a woman. A hint of nostalgia appeared in Yamu's eyes. How should I put this? She wasn't incredibly beautiful, but she was so beautiful that it was impossible for anyone to forget her once they saw her. It was as if the entire world was contained in her eyes. She was flying alone in the sky. When I saw her, I could tell with just one glance that she was definitely not a shaman, and neither was she a berserker, because that presence was completely different from ours. If you could see an immortal, you would definitely be able to tell with just one glance. This was a completely different feeling. I can still remember that when she saw me, there was a strange look on her face. That look was filled with complicated emotions, pity, and a hint of fear. She seemed to be really afraid of me, but her level of cultivation made me feel as if I was facing a ladder shaman. I still couldn't understand why there was fear on her face. As Yamu drank his wine, he shook his head as he spoke, as if even now, he still could not understand it. Su Ming sat by the side and lifted his head slowly. He looked at the stars that would occasionally shine in the dark sky, and a profound look slowly appeared in his eyes. Once it fused with the unique presence on his masked face, an indescribable charm gradually appeared on his face. Yamu put down the pot of wine and no longer thought about the woman in his memories. He instinctively cast Su Ming a glance, but the moment he did so, a shudder suddenly ran through him, and his expression changed drastically. Yamu was momentarily stunned before he sucked in a sharp breath. When Su Ming lowered his head and looked towards him, the profound look in his eyes disappeared and turned into calmness. Only then was Yamu stunned, and he rubbed his eyes. What's wrong? Su Ming asked. The feeling you gave me just now was exactly the same as when I saw the immortal woman and the old immortal in the past. This is a completely different presence from us. Yamu remained silent for a moment before he looked at Su Ming and spoke slowly. Sir Zhongzhe is right. There's a fog around you that no one can see through. If I didn't know that you're a berserker, I would have definitely thought that you're a medial soul catcher. If I didn't know where you came from, I would have thought that you're an immortal who descended here. Yamu shook his head and got rid of the thought that had suddenly appeared in his head. He felt that this was impossible. The immortals who descended here could not become the true divinity of the berserkers. Neither could they obtain the first god of berserkers' legacy. It was the same for the shamans. Immortals, huh? Su Ming mumbled, and anguish rose in his heart. Compared to Yamu's misconception, Su Ming's confusion was the source of his anguish. If he was completely lost, then he would have let it go, but he had some guesses that he did not want to accept, and in fact could not accept. Where will the event of the people from the other worlds be held? When will it be? Also, I once saw a woman with the same temperament as you mentioned in the battlefield outside Sky Mist City. Do you know who she is? How can I find the immortals? Su Ming immediately asked. You're talking too fast. The immortals from the other worlds will descend within 3 years. I don't know the exact date, but when you see the sky that should be dark is still day, or perhaps when it should be day is still dark, then that will be the time for them to descend. I know the exact location. It'll be held at the tallest mountain in the land of the shamans, Cloud Shaman Mountain, because the previous few times it happened there. As for the immortals who appeared in the battlefield, I've never seen them before, so I don't know who they are, but I know a place where you'll definitely see the immortals. That's where the Great Patriarch is, the god of Shaman's temple. It's also on Cloud Shaman Mountain. As Yamu spoke, he stood up and cast Su Ming a glance. After a moment of hesitation, he brought out a wooden slip from his bosom and handed it to Su Ming. By the looks of it, you're about to leave. This is a map of most of the land of the shamans. It's something only members of Autumn Sea Tribe can have. Take it. It'll be of help to you. We might be at war right now, but it's still dangerous for you to travel alone. With your level of cultivation, take care of yourself. Yamu shook his head, picked up the pot of wine, and left Su Ming. Su Ming took the wooden slip and put it away in his bosom. Once he stood up, he did indeed choose to leave. His goal in coming to the land of the shamans was not just to let himself experience life and death in battles to reach a breakthrough in his level of cultivation, but also to find out what destiny was from the immortals who descended. The immortals from the other worlds would descend within 3 years. He had to go, but before that, he still had many things he needed to do. It did not matter whether it was creating medicinal pills, refining the old berserker in the berserker soul realm, practicing the wind berserker and lightning berserker arts, or melting the crystal of inheritance. He needed time to prepare for all of these things. He also needed to decide whether the rod snake should go through a metamorphosis, the unknown medicinal pill in the medicinal cauldron, and he also needed to refine Han Mountain Bell further due to the increase in his level of cultivation so that he could master the true might of this priceless treasure. All of these things were waiting for Su Ming to complete. 3 years. 3 years later, I will become stronger. Determination appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He was just about to leave when his expression suddenly changed and he lifted his head. At that moment, before Yamu had gone too far away, booming sounds suddenly came from the dark sky. As the sea of clouds tumbled about, the mackerel pikes in the sky roared together. Their roars did not sound as if they had run into an enemy, but as if they were welcoming someone respectfully, and they retreated simultaneously. At the same time, a gigantic mackerel pikes appeared in the sea of clouds. Its size could not be seen, and only part of its body could be seen. That mackerel pikes looked as if it was treating the sky as an ocean as it swam towards Su Ming. On its back was a woman holding a bamboo flute. That woman's black hair danced in the air, and she wore a white robe. As she got closer, a beautiful face that would make all those who saw it feel their hearts pounding in excitement. All of you should be familiar with this woman. Ahem, it's August now. My fellow Taoists, with this little mackerel pikes as my official debut, I ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 391. Just what sort of storm would Su Ming, who is alone in the land of the shamans, stir up? Just what sort of storm would Destiny's Guest stir up? Just what sort of shocking secret would be contained within the fear, pity, and complicated expressions of the immortals from the other worlds? Just what sort of existence was contained within the darkness of the Dead Sea? The eastern wastelands were closing in on them, and the seawater was covering them. Just where would Su Ming go in a disaster that would sweep through eastern wastelands and south morning? Once his level of cultivation increased and time passed, would the land still contain the memories of the past? August will be exciting, I promise you. I beg for a guaranteed monthly ticket. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 392. This was the third time Su Ming saw the mackerel pike and the woman. The first time was when he had just transcended and was on his way to Freezing Sky Clan when he saw the woman at Sky Mist Barrier. He heard the booming sounds from her battle against Bai Chong Zai. From that moment onwards, the mackerel pike and the woman's figure were forever etched in Su Ming's memories. The second time was during the battle in Sky Mist City. During that time, he saw the woman joining the battle and saw the mackerel pike's strange power. It was also during that time that the woman helped him in secret, allowing him to leave the battlefield. Yet only during this third time did Su Ming see the woman and the sacred beast that he would never forget the moment he saw it, the mackerel pike, at such a close distance. Su Ming stood there and looked at the sea of clouds tumbling in the sky. He looked at the numerous mackerel pike that had become much smaller and were welcoming him respectfully as they whistled through the air. He looked at the beautiful woman with her hair dancing in the air. She held the flute in her hands and swept her gaze across the land. During that instant, the woman's eyes swept past Su Ming, who was in the temporary tribe of Autumn Sea Tribe on the ground. She did not stop. It was as if Su Ming did not exist in her eyes. When the gigantic mackerel pike finally floated in the sky above the tribe, the woman walked down lightly. Her robes fluttered in the wind, showing off her beauty. She landed in the tribe and turned into a white arc that flew towards the center of the tribe. Not much time had passed since she appeared until she disappeared from the tribe, but it was enough to make all the members of Autumn Sea Tribe become excited. There might not be any uproar, but Su Ming could clearly see the excitement and fanaticism in the eyes of all the members of Autumn Sea Tribe. Sacred Lady Wan Xiao. Yamu, who was standing 100 feet away from Su Ming, stared at the spot where the woman disappeared. A fanatical look along with a hint of complicated emotions appeared in his eyes. After some time, he shook his head, picked up his pot of wine, and walked into the distance. As he left, silence gradually returned to the bonfire where Su Ming was. Besides the faint crackling sounds coming from the fire, not many other sounds could be heard. Su Ming remained silent for a moment, then went up to the old berserker, whose name he still did not know. The old man's body had been sealed by the shaman Zong, Zay's soul catcher. As time passed, not only did he not recover, even his soul seemed to have frozen up, and his eyes were lifeless. Su Ming waved his arm beside the old berserker and immediately put him away into the fire ape's storage bag. After tidying up his luggage, Su Ming turned his head around and cast a glance at Autumn Sea Tribe's temporary tribe before turning around and walking out of the tribe. He was going to leave and find his own path. Before he left, he did not visit the shaman of Autumn Sea Tribe or the saintess, Wan Xiao. They had saved him because they wanted to have a conversation with eldest senior brother. It was a trade. Besides Yimu, the other people's attitudes towards Su Ming were cold, just like how they had done just now. Once their conversation ended, they completely ignored him. Su Ming might not be bothered by it, but he would not go and make trouble for himself. If the others did not care about him, then he would not care about them. As he turned around, Su Ming gradually walked into the distance. His back looked rather bleak and lonely in the night, and he did not fit in with the surroundings. There was a sense of bewilderment surrounding him, but it was usually hidden very well by Su Ming. Only when he was alone would that bewilderment show itself against his will. As he walked, Su Ming walked past the lit bonfires. As he walked, the people from Autumn Sea Tribe who were on night duty saw him. They must have received orders, and when they saw that Su Ming was walking out of the tribe instead of entering some of the important places in Autumn Sea Tribe, they did not stop him. They only watched him coldly. Just as Su Ming was about to walk out of Autumn Sea Tribe, his footsteps suddenly came to a halt because a hoarse voice traveled forth slowly from the depths of the tribe behind him. "Are you going to leave just like that?" Su Ming was not unfamiliar with that voice. It belonged to the old ladder shaman. "Autumn Sea Tribe saved you twice. Don't you have anything to repay us for?" The old woman's voice was cold, and there was not a hint of emotion in it as it echoed languidly beside Su Ming. Su Ming fell silent. "Leave your bracelet behind. That is my ninely shaman soul. It doesn't belong to you." The old woman's voice traveled forth from behind Su Ming, causing a layer of ripples to appear around him. "This is something your ninely shaman lord gave me." Su Ming turned around and looked behind him. He did not see the old woman anywhere he looked. "Or perhaps, before the shaman lord comes, you can stay." Almost at the instant Su Ming finished speaking, the old woman's voice traveled into his ears once again. As she spoke, the originally empty space in front of Su Ming suddenly distorted, and she walked out from within. "I'll give you the span of 10 breaths to make your choice." The old woman stood there and cast Su Ming a cold glance, then no longer bothered herself with him. To her, Su Ming was just a tool for their tribe to communicate with the shaman lord. If this tool wanted to leave, then it was not impossible, but he had to leave that bracelet behind. Besides, Su Ming's level of cultivation was nothing in her eyes. The weak had no right to make demands before the strong. They could only obey. She did not care about Su Ming's status in the land of berserkers. Even if she had heard that he had obtained a hint of the god of berserkers' power, she had never seen this power before. In her eyes, with her status as a ninely shaman, her power as a ladder shaman, and her own tribe, she did not believe that this so-called power of the god of berserkers could kill her. Besides, she had come here on orders. Someone had asked her to come here to test the waters. She did not believe that this was the power of the god of berserkers. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the bracelet on his arm. Time passed by, and when the 6th breath arrived, Su Ming no longer hesitated and took off the bracelet. He lifted his head and looked at the old woman. He knew that she did not care about him. In fact, when she looked at him, she did not even bother hiding the gaze of someone in a superior position, as if she was looking at an ant. She had saved him for the sake of talking to him. She had saved him for the bracelet. In truth, the old woman was not the only one who thought this way. Zhongzhe was also the same. Su Ming smiled faintly and looked at the old woman before he waved the bracelet at her. "From now on, I will no longer have anything to do with Autumn Sea Tribe. You saved me once in exchange for a chance to talk to the shaman lord. This is a deal. You saved me twice, and now you want this bracelet. This is also a deal. Now that everything is ended, I will take my leave." Su Ming's gaze was calm as he turned around and walked out. The old woman took the bracelet. Once she cast a glance at it, her gaze fell on Su Ming's back, and a glint appeared in her eyes. She might respect the shaman lord, but she was still a powerful berserker of Autumn Sea Tribe. Besides, the situation in the land of the shamans had changed. She could not place all her hopes on the shaman lord. In her eyes, Su Ming was incredibly weak. If he left alone, then he would definitely die in the land of the shamans. Once he died, then his treasures would be taken away by others. In fact, some of the things that even she thought were secrets would end up being taken away by others. If that was the case, then it was better for him to stay. The 2 deals have indeed ended, but since you're a berserker, why did you take our soul catcher pearl? Leave the soul catcher pearl behind and tell us about the candle dragon's presence. Only then will we let you leave. Autumn Sea Tribe will not make things difficult for you. We will only take your item and keep it for you. When the shaman lord returns, I will naturally give it to him. Or else, before the old woman could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Su Ming's long string of laughter. Su Ming had been enduring this for a long time. He could give her the bracelet if she wanted it, but this item did not belong to him in the first place. Yet even after he gave it to her, Autumn Sea Tribe still made things difficult for him and demanded spirit plunder and even wanted to find out the secret of his soul catcher pearl. If Su Ming submitted to them once again, then what awaited him would be even more subservient actions. Autumn Sea Tribe, do you really think that you can control everything about me? You've already taken the bracelet. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't go overboard. Su Ming turned around swiftly, and a freezing glare appeared in his eyes. As Su Ming's words traveled outwards, a large number of shamans immediately appeared around him. All of them looked at him coldly, and besides the aloof look in their eyes, there was also disdain. As for the old woman, a cold sneer appeared on her face. You don't know what's good for you. Something like the soul catcher pearl will only bring disaster to you. I'm doing this out of consideration for you and reducing the danger you'll face when you go out. It's fine if you don't thank me, but you're still acting so arrogantly. With your level of cultivation, I'm curious. What right do you have to threaten me? A glint appeared in the old woman's eyes, and as she spoke, she took a step forward. With that one step, the entire ground seemed to tremble. The space between her and Su Ming also looked as if it had frozen up. The power of the world around them also charged towards Su Ming at that instant with a loud rumble. There was no divine ability that shook the sky and earth, but with just that one step, she could gather the power of the world and force it down on Su Ming. This sort of strength was something that the bone sacrifice realm could not hope to compare to. She did not want to kill Su Ming. She only wanted to injure him so badly that he would know what sort of attitude the weak should have when they face the strong. Yet the instant she took that one step and the power of the world charged towards Su Ming, he did not cast any other methods. He only lifted his right hand and stretched out his index finger. The strand of hair wrapped around his finger started burning, and an indescribable power erupted forth with a bang from that finger. The strength of that power was so great that the instant it erupted, booming sounds instantly rang out around Su Ming. The power of the world that the old woman had brought over instantly crumbled layer by layer, as if it could not withstand the indescribable power that erupted from Su Ming's body. That power even started sweeping through the area in a ring shape. The expressions of the shamans in the area immediately changed drastically, and they retreated simultaneously. Yet even so, they were still swept up by the impact that was spreading in all directions. All of them coughed up blood and fell back like kites with their strings snapped. Su Ming stood at the center of it all. His hair danced in the air, his expression was cold, and his gaze was like lightning. His robes fluttered in the wind, and a violent gust of wind howled around him. He stared coldly at the old woman, whose expression had already changed drastically. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 393. Now, you know what right I have to threaten you. Su Ming's words were cold as he spoke languidly. The old woman's expression changed rapidly. Under that impact, she instinctively took a few steps back. Her pupils shrank, and she stared at Su Ming's right index finger before she sucked in a deep breath. The power of the god of berserkers, that power only appeared for a brief moment before disappearing without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. The strand of hair on Su Ming's right index finger also stopped burning. At the same time, the impact around them also disappeared. Without any further force, Su Ming's floating hair fell down, and his robes no longer danced in the air. However, he stood there like a mountain, staring at the old woman with an aloof expression. The strand of hair on his finger might not have exuded any aura, just like before, but when the old woman saw the aura that erupted from him, her breathing quickened. She glared at Su Ming's right index finger. It was not that she did not check that finger just now, but she could not find anything off about it. This was also the reason why she looked down on the power of the god of berserkers. After all, she was a shaman, not a berserker. She did not acknowledge this so-called god of berserkers. She firmly believed that all power came from one's own training. No matter how strong external power was, it was still just external power. With her power as a ladder shaman, she did not believe that there was an external power that even a weak berserker in the bone sacrifice realm could control and kill her in an instant. Yet at that moment, sweat broke out on her forehead. During that instant just now, when she witnessed the power of the god of berserkers, she had felt her heart pounding in fear. Under that presence, she could not even think of fighting back. It was as if she had been completely suppressed, and her mind was blank. She did not have a single doubt that if Su Ming wanted to kill her, then with that one finger, she would definitely not be able to survive. Granny, let him go. Just as the old woman was shocked, and Su Ming looked at her coldly with a glint in his eyes, the area fell into silence. At that moment, a woman's graceful voice reverberated in the silence. It was a woman in white who walked towards them from the distance and stood beside the old woman. That woman was incredibly beautiful. Her hair fell over her shoulders, and as she stood there, she looked like a calm lake. She was the saint of Autumn Sea Tribe, Wan Xiao. Su Ming swept his gaze past the woman in white. He did not speak, but instead took a few steps backwards. With one move, he turned into a long arc and charged into the dark sky. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Even after Su Ming left, the old woman's face was still slightly pale. During the instant the power of the god of berserkers had spread out, it had brought a memory and a shock that was difficult to erase to the old woman. Wan Xiao was too rash, Granny. The beautiful woman frowned and spoke softly. Her heart was also shaken. This was the first time she had experienced the strength of the god of berserkers' power. The old woman was silent for a moment before shaking her head. The power of the god of berserkers. I underestimated him. Even if you didn't ask me to do this, I would have done it anyway. Perhaps it will be of help to Sir Zhongzhe in his breakthrough. Did you leave behind everything that happened just now? There was a slightly complicated look on the old woman's face as she looked in the direction Su Ming had left. The woman nodded her head lightly. When she lifted her right hand, an ancient mirror the size of her palm appeared in her hand. There was a layer of fog surrounding the mirror, and when the woman touched it with her left hand, all the fog was instantly sucked into the mirror. A strong ray of light spread out from the mirror, causing the air around it to distort. Soon after, as the space distorted, an illusory scene appeared. Pictures appeared, and within those pictures was the battle between Su Ming and the old woman. They had not truly attacked each other. They had only used the power of the world to fight. They were vivid and lifelike, and even the presence and domineering presence of the power of the god of berserkers were clearly preserved. It's a pity that it'll be difficult for me to come into contact with Su Ming in the future, and I'll have to face the wrath of the shaman lord. The woman in white said softly. There's no need to worry about this, Su Ming. Once he doesn't have the power of the god of berserkers, he'll just be an ant. There's no need for us to become friends with him. Besides, didn't you use the power of thought soothsayers to predict his future? This person has lived a normal life, and there's nothing special about him. He's also a person with a short life. The only thing we have to worry about is the wrath of the shaman lord. But if this thing can help Sir Zhongzhe increase his level of cultivation, then it'll be worth it, the old woman said languidly with a glint in her eyes. Up until now, she still did not pay too much attention to Su Ming. What she cared about was the power of the god of berserkers that made her feel death. In her eyes, without the power of the god of berserkers, Su Ming was indeed no different from an ant. But Granny, when Su Ming used the power of the god of berserkers, just now my senses fluctuated. This Su Ming might not be as I predicted, but the woman in white frowned. The old woman was momentarily stunned. Before she stopped Su Ming just now, she had been with Wan Xiao, and she had personally witnessed the woman predicting Su Ming's future. The process had been smooth, and she had also seen Su Ming's future clearly. This person had lived a normal life, and his limit was the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. He would also die several years later during the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. Yet now, when she heard Wan Qiu's hesitant words, she could not help but be surprised. There's something strange about this person. My previous predictions were successful, and even now, when I try to predict his future again, it's still the same. The answer I get is the same. However, when this person's power of the god of berserkers spread out just now, I suddenly felt uneasy under the powerful power of the world. I tried to predict his future once again, but all I saw was a blur. In fact, I didn't even see anything, but I already felt a sense of death looming over me. The woman in white frowned and closed her eyes as if she was sensing something. If it's not a figment of my imagination, then this person's future is being affected by a powerful force and is being covered up. What he shows is intentionally for others to see, but it's not real. If that's really the case, then perhaps we shouldn't offend this person. Wan Qiu opened her eyes, and a hint of fatigue and puzzlement appeared briefly in her eyes. The old woman remained silent for a moment before she spoke languidly. Things have already progressed to this state. Don't bother about it anymore. I don't think this Su Ming is just an ant like you said. Let's go. Come with me to see Sir Zhongzhe. As the old woman spoke, she turned around and left. Wan Qiu stood there and looked in the direction Su Ming left. There was still a frown on her beautiful face, but she did not continue trying to predict his future. Instead, she followed the old woman. At that moment, within Sky Mist Barrier, in the land of the berserkers, was a frozen world. At the end of the land that was covered in silver frost was a place that surpassed the location of Phantom Deus tribe. There was a gigantic tribe that seemed to have no borders. The size of this tribe and the vastness of its territory was something rarely seen in the land of South Morning. This was one of the two great berserker tribes in the land of South Morning, the great tribe of Freezing Sky. At that moment, within the territory of the great tribe of Freezing Sky, was an incredibly luxurious tower. That person was dressed in a long blue robe. His hair was white and his body was thin. He was meditating with his eyes closed. After a long while, the old man opened his eyes slowly. The moment he did so, distortions and ripples immediately appeared on his body. His entire body soon became indistinct, and it was as if another person's shadow had appeared on that indistinct body. It was a person wearing an emperor's robe and a crown. His face might not be seen clearly, but it could be seen that this person was definitely not an old man, but a middle-aged man. That person's eyes were profound. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the tower, pierce through the air, pierce through the endless distance, and land on the land of the shamans in the distance, on the temporary tribe of the great Mediterranean Sea, autumn tribe of the shamans, and on Wan Qiu. The shaman's clairvoyance. This mysterious ability actually managed to see some clues even under my interference. But since you didn't investigate it, I'll spare your life. The man with the crown mumbled to himself flatly. He lifted his right hand, and on his palm was a crane made of rice paper. That crane flew out and charged into the sky through the window. Once it disappeared into the 9 heavens, the man closed his eyes. The instant he closed his eyes, the indistinct and distortions on his body disappeared, and he turned back into the white-haired old man dressed in a long blue robe. His thin appearance was nothing out of the ordinary. Ripples spread out from the paper crane that flew out from the great tribe of Freezing Sky above the 9 heavens, and it disappeared in an instant. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky above Sky Mist City, which was located in the distance. Occasionally, small-scale battles would break out between the two sides in the battle outside Sky Mist City. As the shaman army gathered together, warriors from various tribes would arrive in the land of berserkers every single day to become a new force to protect Sky Mist. The gigantic stone monument in the city was incredibly eye-catching. All the names listed on it would be remembered by the people. Their fame would spread out, and they would be respected by the people. There was one name that was currently ranked in the 170th place. His name was Yufeng. and he was the only survivor from a small tribe. No one seemed to have noticed the paper crane in the sky. With a flap of its wings, it disappeared once again. This time, when it reappeared, it was at the edge of the land of South Morning, with a dead sea stretched out. Raging waves roared on the surface of the sea. Countless shadows swam about in the seawater. The seawater had already submerged the trapezoidal mountain range and was slowly spreading towards the land of the shamans. In the black seabed in the distance, a gigantic head could be vaguely seen. Its eyes were revealed, and it was staring coldly at the land of South Morning. The paper crane in the sky charged forward once again and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was still above the Dead Sea. However, this place was already incredibly far away from the land of South Morning. There was no end to the seawater beneath them. The waves sparkled, and occasionally aquatic dragons that were hundreds of thousands of feet long would leap out of the sea, roaring as they swam about. If anyone took a closer look, they would find that there was an endless amount of dead sea beasts on the surface of the sea, and they were all heading towards the land of South Morning. There was a gigantic floating object on the surface of the sea. It looked like a corner of a palace that had collapsed. It floated along with the waves and headed towards the land of South Morning. Behind it were an endless amount of palace wreckages like this. One of the wreckages had a few big words on it that looked like a plaque that was connected to the palace. Great Sky Palace. There was an ancient air to those words. Besides the endless amount of dead sea beasts on the surface of the sea, there were also 8 other gigantic heads with their eyes revealed on the surface of the sea. It was as if there were giants moving forward at the bottom of the sea. The paper crane flashed in the sky and disappeared once again. This time, when it reappeared, there was a continent that far surpassed the land of South Morning beneath it. There were no less than 1 million people packed closely together on the continent near the Dead Sea. All of them were sitting cross-legged on the ground, and the area they covered was so big that one could not see the end of it. Their gazes were directed to the south of the land of South Morning. 10 more years, the paper crane in the sky flashed once again and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was still on eastern wastelands. However, it was in another direction. That was the east of eastern wastelands. The entire land in the east was enveloped by a layer of black fog. There was not a single hint of life within it. There were only shrill screams of pain and wails that echoed in the air all year long. The instant the paper crane appeared, a gigantic hand suddenly shot out from the black fog and seized it. Hidden Dragon Sect, Great Leaf Immortal Sect, Sky Mist Owl, I am here. August plot was a link between the previous plot and the next plot. It needed to be filled in carefully, and he did not dare to write it carelessly. There are no explosions today, but there would be quite a number of explosions this month. The ones he owed last month would be added up this month. On the first day of the month, he would ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket. His goal this month was still to get into the top 3. July had failed, but August had to try again. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 394. I want to fight for the monthly votes. I want to fight for the family. I want to fight for the recommendation. I want to fight for everyone. I'm very satisfied with the 2 chapters one wrote today, especially the last chapter. I have a big plan in my heart, and it's slowly unfolding. I've been preparing for such a long time for a different pattern and cause and effect from Renegade Celestial. Every time I think about it, I'm very excited and I feel very good. Please guarantee the monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 395. One crane was in the world, and one crane was in the wilderness. This paper crane might not have the beautiful legend of Harmonious Morris Alba flapping its wings, but it possessed a power that made it seem as if it could move through dimensions. It could be said to have been reborn when it flew out of the great tribe of Freezing Sky until it died in eastern wastelands. Its life was short, But during that short span of time, everything that happened on the land and the sea where it passed by made the entire world seem to have shrunk and become clear before its eyes. However, it was a pity that this clear gaze did not belong to Su Ming. It did not belong to many people. Only the old man who spread out the paper crane and flew into the nine heavens, or rather, the man in the emperor's robe and crown, belonged to him. Su Ming left Autumn's sea tribe. He walked calmly in the sky above the land of the shamans. There were no pursuers behind him, and there were no obstructions in front of him. All he could see was the vast sky and the desolate land. Ever since he joined the Battle of Sky Mist City, it was only then that he had truly broken free from all restraints. As he looked at the sky and land before him, Su Ming suddenly had a feeling that he had returned to the time when he first opened his eyes on a mountain range outside Han Mountain City. At that time, he had looked at the unfamiliar sky in a daze. His weak power had caused him to be lost for a long period of time. At that moment, he was still looking at the unfamiliar sky and walking in the world. The wind lifted his hair, revealing the profound look in his eyes. At that moment, he might still be a little lost, but he now had a direction. He might still not be able to stand at the peak of his power, but compared to the past, he was now like two sides of a ravine. Before the next immortals from the other worlds descend, I have to make myself stronger. Su Ming brought out the mask from his bosom and put it on his face. He did not intend to take it off. This was the method he used to hide his identity in the land of the shamans. Unless he found a better way, he would continue wearing it. With spirit plunder and his divine sense, as long as he did not run into powerful shamans, then even if he ran into a latter shaman, the possibility of them being able to tell that he was not a shaman was not high. Besides, even if he ran into powerful shamans who could tell that he was not a shaman, Su Ming still had a way to explain his identity. My appearance is very similar to the immortals from the other worlds. If that's the case, Su Ming closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was a strange look in his eyes. But I'm really curious. Why are the two people who call me Destiny so sure that I am Destiny? Su Ming walked through the world so quickly that he charged forward. On the way, he ran into some shamans, but most of the time, once they saw him, they would spread out their senses and touch his divine sense before withdrawing it. If there was no prior judgment, most people would not suspect Su Ming. Han Mountain's ancestor is waiting for Destiny to take him away. That's why when he saw me, he thought I was Destiny. I can explain it with the excuse that I'm the first person to appear before him after so many years. However, that long-haired woman on the battlefield, she just glanced at me and immediately said that I am Destiny. This matter is very fishy. How could she say that I am Destiny just like that? Unless she's seen me before. Su Ming fell into pensive silence. However, these were all just his guesses. He did not have any concrete information. He flew for 7 days straight. Occasionally, Su Ming would observe the map given by Yamu. He knew that he was about to reach the center of the land of the shamans, but he was only at the center. If he looked at the map of the entire land of the shamans, then Su Ming's current location was still considered rather remote. The ground here was lush with greenery, but the wind was much stronger than in the outskirts. He could also smell the stench of blood in the wind, because most of the wind here came from the Dead Sea and swept past the land of the shamans. Su Ming swept his gaze across the land as he stood in the midst of a mountain range. He would occasionally do this along the way, cautiously observing whether there was any danger around him. However, this time, the instant his gaze swept past the mountain range, he suddenly froze and let out a soft gasp of surprise. He immediately focused his gaze and spread his divine sense outwards to cover the entire mountain range. After a moment, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. With his current level of cultivation, he might not be able to move or manipulate the power of the world, but he who had 4 berserker bones and had reached the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm could tell just how much power of the world there was. At first glance, the mountain range looked normal. Even if he took a closer look, he would find that it was still very normal. There was nothing special about it. Even if he spread his divine sense and used the senses of the shaman tribe, it would still be the same. The power of the world was also very thin in this place. and the stench of blood was much stronger than in other places. That was why most of the shamans who passed by this place in the past, even if they were latter shamans, did not pay too much attention to this place. However, this place gradually became different in Su Ming's eyes. A thick veil seemed to have been lifted off the mountain range in his eyes, revealing its true appearance. The mountain range started in the east and started spreading northward in a curve before disappearing into the land in the distance. It looked like a dragon that had revealed part of its back as it swam across the land. The mountains towered into the sky, and strange rocks could be seen everywhere. There were also plants growing all over them. However, most of those plants looked strange. They swayed in the wind and exuded a sense of danger. It was as if these plants were born with great offensive abilities. Su Ming stared at the mountain range and lifted his right hand before he swung it lightly to his left. He did not circulate the power of the berserker bones in his body. It looked like a casual slash, but layers of ripples instantly appeared in the air to his left. He closed his eyes slightly and stretched his right hand into the ripples, as if he was sensing something. The mountain range comes from the east and goes to the north. It has turned into the shape of a corner. It looks like a dragon, but in truth, this is a natural but slightly incomplete pattern of the three evils. After some time, a surprised look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He sank down and circled the mountain range once. It was a curve in a mountain range. Extinction, birth, nourishment, calamity time. The northeast of this place is the mountain range. The southwest is empty. The west is the birth, and the south is the nourishment. If that's the case, then, without the extinction, this should be an incomplete pattern. Su Ming observed the mountain range for a long time, and with his understanding towards the execution of three evils in his head, he slowly analyzed the strangeness of the mountain range. But the wind coming from the east might not have been strong in the past, but now it's clear that it has become stronger due to the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands. There's even a bloody stench in the wind. If I look at this mountain range as a dragon's head, then it should be a dead thing. But if the wind from the east blows past the dragon's head, then it'll be as if the dragon's head is alive and can breathe. I've never run into this sort of extinction and destruction before. I gained an epiphany regarding the execution of three evils when I was in Sky Mist City's battlefield. Not only can this art be used to sever, it can also be erected. But by the looks of it now, my thoughts aren't complete. Besides severing and erecting, I can also change it. I can change it on the ground to turn it into killing intent. One natural pattern. Not only did the power of the world gather here, it also formed the power of the three evils, causing this place to turn into a place where I can rest and kill without too many changes. As Su Ming continued observing the mountain range, his expression gradually changed. There was no extinction in this place to begin with, which meant that there was no destruction among the three evils. Based on Su Ming's understanding, most of the spots in the world contained the three evils, but the three evils were formless existences. Yet this place had naturally formed this pattern as time passed, and it was a pattern that could be seen with the naked eye. This was a huge difference. This difference was akin to the difference between an illusory form and a corporeal form. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence. He originally did not have a clear direction in mind, but when he saw how attractive the mountain range was, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he made his decision. This place isn't bad. I can open up a cave abode here and turn it into my residence. But this place might be secluded, but there should be a lot of shamans around here. If that's the case, I'll have to be more careful. Su Ming flew towards the mountain range. Before long, he stood at the corner between the east and north of the mountain range. This place was also the spot that looked like the mouth of a dragon's head when he was in midair. The mountain range in this place was incredibly tall. Because of that, most of the wind blowing from the east was blocked at the foot of the mountain. It gathered together and did not dissipate, causing Su Ming to see a layer of fog and a thick stench of blood as he stood at the top of the mountain and looked down. The mountain rocks around him were also damp. There were even some places where dew seeped out. Should I open it or not? Su Ming hesitated. As long as he completely opened up the corner of the mountain range under his feet and formed a gigantic gap, then he could let the wind from the east blow through the mouth. That way, he would be able to create the scene of the dragon breathing. Once he did this, the power of the world in this place would increase by leaps and bounds. If he meditated and recuperated in this place, it would be incredibly beneficial for Su Ming to refine his cultivation base. It would also be the same for him when he created medicinal pills. Similarly, if he had a gap and the pattern of the world in this place looked as if the dragon's head had come back to life, then if he cast the execution of 3 evils here, the power of the art would be much greater than when he was casting on the battlefield. In fact, Su Ming had a feeling that if he did what he wanted and cast the execution of 3 evils here, he would be as if he was one with the place. At that time, the power of the art would be enough to make his heart pound in excitement. This was just one of the reasons. Su Ming had been to quite a number of places with this pattern in the mountain range, but this was the first time he saw it. If he could study the 3 evils that seemed to have gained physical form for a long period of time and explore its secrets and rules, then he would gain an even deeper understanding of the execution of 3 evils. The other arts left behind in Dark Mountain are no longer suitable for me to use. Only the execution of 3 evils. Besides that, the burning of blood is the only other thing left. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the sky. The mountain range was very tall. If it was nighttime and the moonlight shone on the ground, it would be very clear. However, even though the benefits were great, there were also a lot of disadvantages. First of all, this place would be very eye-catching. Not only would it attract attention, it might also cause conflicts. The monthly votes were great, but it would be difficult for him to maintain it. He did not ask for a month. He only asked for 1 more minute, asking for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 396. If he wanted to turn trash into treasure, he would need to have the ability to protect it. By the looks of it, no one in the shaman tribe should be able to see what's wrong with this place. After all, if I didn't understand the execution of 3 evils, I wouldn't have been able to see the secret of this place. I wonder if the immortals who descended here can see it, but the main reason for the pattern of this place is the foul wind blowing from the east. If that's the case, then this wind has only appeared in eastern wastelands during the past year. It has only been a short period of time. Even if there are those who understand the pattern of this place, they wouldn't have noticed this place. If I give up on this place, it'll be too much of a pity. Resolve appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He knew clearly that he would not give up on this place. Since he was certain of this, then what he needed to do was to think about how he could guard against the things that might happen in the future and protect his first cave abode in the land of the shamans. The main structure of the pattern of the 3 evils will remain the same, but I'll have to change some of the minor details. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. With one move, he charged towards the eastern section of the mountain range. His body would occasionally appear in the mountain range, and green light would also shine. Clearly, Su Ming was using the sharpness of the virescent sword to modify the mountain. A day later, Su Ming arrived at the northern section of the mountain range. Once he did the same thing, he removed all the parts of the mountain range that did not fit his requirements and added some disguises before he returned to the corner between the east and west. He stood there and fell into a moment of pensive silence before he took a step forward. As if he was falling down a cliff, he charged towards the canyons that were filled with thick fog and a foul stench. He traveled incredibly quickly, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the bottom of the cliff. Most of the plants there had turned purplish-black and were exuding an incredibly aggressive aura. Some of the vines even swung and charged towards Su Ming as he descended. Su Ming ignored it. Once he dodged to the bottom of the cliff, green light shone at the center of his brows, and the small sword instantly flew out to cut down the mountain range. Su Ming stood by the side and spread his divine sense outwards to cover the entire area. He examined the area once again, and only then was he satisfied. He had searched through this place several times over the past few days and was certain that he had not left anything behind. Besides him, There was no other person here. As Su Ming spread his divine sense outwards to explore the place, he found that the virescent sword had already cut a hole in the stone wall before him. The shattered stones inside had also turned into ashes, and the small virescent sword had opened up 7 to 8 stone rooms based on Su Ming's will, turning them into a gigantic cave abode within the mountain. As soon as the Immortal's Cave was formed, a gust of wind blew in from the east, carrying with it the stench of blood from the abyss. It filled the entire cave, making it look just like the outside world. Su Ming had expected this to happen a long time ago. With a calm expression on his face, he walked into the cave abode and disappeared into the fog. When he reappeared, he was already at the end of the cave abode. There was a gigantic stone wall that was nearly 1,000 feet tall there. It was the outer shell of the mountain that had been hollowed out. The outer shell was dozens of feet thick. When the wind blew on it, it was blocked. Su Ming stood beside the stone wall and lifted his right hand to press on it. The power of berserker bones in his body flowed out gently, and a crack immediately spread out from his hand and fused into the stone wall. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and a few cracks instantly appeared. As they spread out, they pierced through the stone wall and formed a connection with the outside world. Su Ming took a few steps forward, and once he repeated this action 7 to 8 times, a large number of cracks appeared on the stone wall. However, Su Ming's actions were ingenious. Even though there were quite a number of cracks, the stone wall did not show any signs of crumbling. Almost the instant the cracks formed and the connection with the outside world was formed, a gust of wind blew in from the entrance of the cave. It did not stop for even a single moment, but seeped into the cracks and charged outside. The mountain range that was blocking the wind might not have completely stopped blocking the wind, but there were now gaps between the cracks, causing the pattern of the entire mountain range to come to life. As the wind continued blowing past Su Ming and into the crack on the stone wall, Su Ming could clearly feel the power of the world around him slowly gathering towards him, as if the dragon's head in the place had just woken up and was beginning to breathe gently. If a person breathed, the power of the world would float towards them, and the power of the world would circulate within their bodies. Similarly, the breathing formed by the pattern was like the dragon breathing and the mountain breathing. The entire mountain range trembled slightly, and the power of the world formed a cycle and came faintly towards them. The plants on the mountain started trembling at the same time, as if they had opened up all parts of their bodies to absorb the power of the world from all directions. At the same time, Su Ming could clearly feel that as the mountain breathed and as the dragon's head breathed, the berserker bones in his body started circulating on their own. As blue light flashed, the power of the world continuously seeped into his body and fused together with the 4 berserker bones. Besides a small number of people in the bone sacrifice realm who could use the deity statue's power to turn the aura of transcendence into bones, the rest of the time, if they wanted to increase their berserker bones, they would need to use the power of the world. The power of the world was formless. Those in the bone sacrifice realm could not directly mobilize the power of the world, but they could absorb it as they breathed. Once it fused with the blood in their bodies, a power that could circulate through their entire body would be formed. This was the power of berserker bones. Once that power accumulated to a certain degree, it would turn in a physical form and change the spine, causing one of the bones within to gradually turn into a berserker bone. Joy appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Once he took in a deep breath of the power of the world that came with the mountain's breathing, he quickly walked out of his cave abode. With one leap, he stood in midair and lowered his head to look around. At that moment, the plants in the mountain range were moving. The power of the world surged towards them from all directions, causing the place to turn into a vortex. The vortex might be shrinking, but as the power of the world surged towards them, it became bigger. It's a good thing I didn't open it completely, or else once the dragon head breathed in and out completely, the presence that would appear in this place would be 10 times stronger than it is now. And at that time, perhaps, Su Ming hesitated for a moment before he shook his head and got rid of the thought that had suddenly appeared in his head. He felt that it was a little unrealistic. That thought had appeared in his head because he was looking at it from midair. The shape of the mountain range and the way it breathed in and out made it seem like a dragon's head was breathing. Then as the wind blew against it all year round, if the mountain was completely opened, then as the wind howled and the mountain absorbed the power of the world, the mountain range might move. The mountain is connected to the ground. How can it move? This idea of mine is a little strange. Su Ming might be mumbling to himself, but he still could not help but ponder over it. The mountain range is like a dragon's head. If I open it completely, then once it starts moving due to the wind, then wouldn't the pattern of the three evils in this place look as if it's alive? It's as if there's a dragon moving forward on the ground. If I can do this, then perhaps after a few years, this vein will possess its own spirit. Su Ming scratched his head and cast a few more glances at the mountain range. When he saw that the vortex beneath him had become much larger, he was not surprised. It was as if he had long since expected this. With one move, he appeared outside the mountain range and found the crack he had opened within the mountain range. After looking at it for a while, Su Ming made some disguises. Once he was certain that no one would notice anything wrong with the mountain wall if they did not look closely, he returned to midair. I've only opened up a portion of it. The vortex here only appeared because it has just begun to breathe, and it will completely dissipate in a few days. At that time, this place will still look the same on the outside, but the inside will be turned upside down. Then I can carve runes on it. If only Hu Zi was here, he would definitely be able to create a rune that only belongs to this place. Right now, I can only use the runes he told me to set up this place. With some disguises, this place will be my first cave abode in the land of the shamans. Satisfaction appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He sank down and sat down cross-legged on the mountain. He brought out spirit plunder and had it float above his head. He wore a mask and was dressed in black. As he meditated, a presence that made it seem as if he was a soul catcher was spreading out from his body. After a moment of thought, Su Ming touched his storage bag with his right hand. Immediately, a red light flashed and the fire ape flew out. It held the rod in its hand and looked around it. Delight immediately appeared on its face, and it bared its teeth at Su Ming. Su Ming smiled. His gaze fell on the mountain range, and a chilling glare gradually appeared in his eyes. This place might not be fully activated, but if anyone dares to provoke me, then I can lure them here and cast the execution of three evils with the layout of this place. I can also control the power of the execution of three evils. In fact, if I run into a powerful enemy, I can even open up all the dragon's mouths in this place and bring out the full power of the attack. At that time, this place will turn into a land of death. 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. During these 3 days, a few shamans flew through the sky and were attracted by the vortex in this place. Just as they were about to come closer to investigate, Su Ming let out a cold harumph, and they noticed his presence. I'm practicing a secret art here. All trespassers will be killed without mercy. Su Ming might be wearing a mask, but the presence of a soul catcher coming from his entire body, especially his profound eyes, immediately made these people's skin crawl. They were only fledgling shamans, but they could tell with just one glance that Su Ming was a medial shaman, and he was even a soul catcher who was incredibly difficult to deal with. They could not help but wrap their fists in their palms towards him respectfully from a distance. The shamans might be of the same race, but their attacks were equally ruthless. It was especially so for soul catchers. They were infamous in the land of the shamans. This sort of existence that was skilled in transforming life and death and refining people into living corpses struck fear into all their enemies. It was also rumored that soul catchers were skilled in curses. They only needed a strand of their enemy's hair or fingernail to cast this spell and kill them without leaving a trace. Because of that, soul catchers were naturally mysterious, and most people did not want to provoke them easily. We're from White Bull Tribe, which is nearby. We didn't know that you were training here, Senior. We came here rashly just now. Please don't be angry. We'll leave quickly. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man. He seemed to only be a fledgling shaman. Once he saw the presence of a soul catcher on Su Ming's body, he instantly became nervous and immediately bowed towards him respectfully. White Bull Tribe was just a small tribe. It would have been fine if they ran into a normal medial shaman, but if they ran into a spirit medium or a medial soul catcher, they had to be respectful. Once he finished speaking, the man quickly brought his tribe members and left the place. When they flew far into the distance and saw that Su Ming did not pursue the matter, he let out a huge sigh of relief. I'll break out tomorrow. Monthly votes, please. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 397. After witnessing everyone's strength, Earroot was scared and didn't dare to link the monthly votes to the new chapters anymore. The consequence of doing so would be Earroot spitting blood on the keyboard today. I looked at the reader's calculations and found that I still have 3 chapters. These 3 chapters will be added in the middle of the month and will be marked with the words added. Tomorrow will be the first release of the month. I'm begging for monthly votes. Also, ahem, Su Ming is still a virgin. Last night, his grandfather came to me in my dream and strongly criticized me. I'm thinking, to be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 398. Slightly north of the mountain range where Su Ming's cave abode was, the group of people led by the middle-aged man were leaving quickly in the sky, afraid that if they were too slow, they would anger the medial soul catcher. Only when they were about 100,000 feet away did they slow down. Occasionally, they would turn their heads back to look. The distance of 100,000 feet caused everything to become blurry. If they did not possess a certain level of cultivation, then they would only be able to see the distance between them. Sir Shaman Ju, what should we do? The tribe member beside the middle-aged man asked with slight anxiety on his face. That's right, Sir Shaman Ju. Half a month ago, everything was normal there, so why is a medial soul catcher here now? Could it be that Black Crane tribe hired a powerful warrior to forcefully occupy that place? All right, shut up. The middle-aged man frowned, and his face was filled with resignation. Once he cast a glance at the people beside him, he looked towards the mountain range where Su Ming was in the distance and sighed. Perhaps this person is just temporarily training there and will leave before long. After all, this place is barren. There's simply nothing that would attract a medial soul catcher to stay for a long time. Let's go. I'll report this to the patriarch when we return to the tribe and let him make a decision. As the middle-aged man spoke, he shook his head and left quickly with the people beside him. He must be someone Black Crane tribe hired. That mountain range is incredibly important to both our tribes. Huh. One of the tribe members behind the middle-aged man mumbled under his breath and did not speak again. As the crowd left, the area gradually returned to silence. Su Ming, who was sitting at the top of the mountain and paying attention to the disappearance of the vortex, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was profound and contained a dark glare as he looked in the direction where the people from White Bull Tribe had left. White Bull Tribe nearby. Su Ming averted his gaze and looked towards the mountain range. With his current divine sense, if he did not spread it out in a ring but gathered it into a single line, then he would be able to spread it to a distance of 100,000 feet. Su Ming could hear the words of the people from White Bull Tribe clearly. Looks like this mountain range isn't completely unnoticed. But before I changed it, this place was indeed barren, and there's nothing special about it. Why would White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe fight over this place? Su Ming was slightly surprised. He was certain that when he decided to open up his cave abode in this place, he had carefully searched through the place several times, and only when he discovered that there was not a single clue about the place did he make his decision. Yet, by the looks of it, there were still some secrets in this place that Su Ming had yet to discover. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he stood up and looked at the vortex formed by the power of the world. It had already shrunk by a large margin, and by the looks of it, it would completely disappear in about 2 more days. At that time, this place would return to its original state. Unless one entered it, it would be difficult to tell that this place had been transformed into an excellent place for cultivation. As for this whirlpool, the White Bull Tribe's clansmen couldn't see it due to the limitations of their cultivation. However, because the power of heaven and earth gathered here, they felt that there was something different about this place, but they couldn't tell what it was exactly. Su Ming moved and started investigating the mountain range once again. As he moved forward, he spread his divine sense outwards, but in the end, he still found nothing. Strange. Su Ming frowned. After a moment of pensive silence, a glint appeared in his eyes. Once he recalled the direction in which the White Bull Tribe members had come and left, he did not investigate the inner parts of the mountain range this time, but instead charged outwards. He expanded his search area and placed his focus on the area 10,000 feet outside the mountain range. Even if it was flat ground, Su Ming still examined it carefully. Several hours later, Su Ming stood on a flat plain that rose and fell about 7,000 feet away from the northern side of the mountain range. He stared at the ground, and a glint appeared in his eyes. Not too far away from him was a hole that had been dug out. That hole was covered by weeds and was not easy to notice at first glance. Besides, this place was outside the mountain range. Su Ming had mostly searched within the mountain range previously, so he did not pay attention to this place. What was even stranger was that even if Su Ming stood there and spread his divine sense to investigate the place, he still did not find anything strange about it. However, when he spread his divine sense into the hole, he let out a soft gasp of surprise. Su Ming's divine sense was bounced back by a brutal force about 100 feet into the hole. It was as if there was some sort of seal there that could stop the power of his divine sense from spreading further. Could it be that White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe are fighting over this place? Su Ming cast a glance at the hole on the ground and walked over. He bent his back and stepped into the hole. The hole was not big, but could fit a person. Once he entered the hole, Su Ming did not show any signs of discomfort. However, when he walked about 100 feet into the hole, his footsteps came to an abrupt halt. This was the spot where his divine sense had been bounced back. His eyes sparkled, and with just one glance, he saw two items on the ground in the hole before him. One was a black stone bowl filled with clear water. This was the first item. The second item was on the ground beside the bowl. It was a black feather that was stuck in the ground. These two items were the ones that had created the power that stopped Su Ming's divine sense from spreading further. Su Ming stood by the side and lowered his head to look at them for a moment. There was nothing special about these two items. The feather was just a normal bird's feather. It was not naturally black either. Some of the spots on it were still white. By the looks of it, it was just a white feather that had been smeared on charcoal after it was burned, causing its color to turn black. As for the stone bowl, it was extremely ordinary, and the water inside was the same. Su Ming narrowed his eyes and spread his divine sense outwards, charging straight towards the feather. The moment he touched it, Su Ming immediately had a feeling as if the feather did not exist. In fact, under that feeling, it was as if the cave did not exist either. It was as if Su Ming had been buried underground. No wonder I didn't sense anything when I was in the cave abode. This feather has the ability to hide itself. It's just a normal item, but it has this sort of ability. Su Ming's divine sense enveloped the feather, and as he examined it layer by layer, his expression suddenly changed, because he could feel a faint divine sense within the feather. This was not a sense of perception, but a divine sense. It was the same as the divine sense he possessed within his body. This was the second time in the land of the shamans, or even in the land of South Morning, that Su Ming had found an item with the same power as his divine sense. The first time was during the auction held in the land of freezing sky. That divine sense was incredibly weak, and it was gathered within the feather. It was this divine sense that allowed the normal feather to possess the ability to hide itself. That divine sense had also noticed Su Ming's existence. As it struggled, it looked as if it wanted to fight against the invasion of Su Ming's divine sense. However, compared to the entirety of Su Ming's divine sense, the divine sense in that feather was slightly weaker. The moment the two of them touched each other, that divine sense instantly disappeared. Even the feather turned into ashes and scattered on the ground. Su Ming was momentarily stunned. This was the first time his divine sense had come into contact with the divine sense of an item. When he saw the feather disappearing, Su Ming's gaze fell on the stone bowl beside him. After a moment of pensive silence, he spread out his divine sense once again. However, this time, under his control, he only spread out a small amount of his divine sense. The instant it touched the stone bowl, he immediately felt a brutal force spreading out from the bowl and crashing into his divine sense. Without a single sound, Su Ming felt as if his mind was ringing. His divine sense was bounced back, but that feeling soon disappeared. Su Ming let out a cold harumph and increased the power of his divine sense by a large margin before he pressed it against the stone bowl. The stone bowl seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure. Cracks appeared on it, and the small amount of divine sense contained within also disappeared. With a crack, the bowl split into two. The clear water within spilled out and seeped into the ground. Su Ming frowned. He did not know what these two items were, but he was certain that they belonged to White Bull Tribe or Black Crane Tribe, or perhaps they belonged to each of them. Without the stone bowl and the black feather, Su Ming closed his eyes and stood there. There was no longer any obstruction to his divine sense. He had yet to arrive, but as his divine sense swept through the area, he charged into the cave. After a moment, Su Ming opened his eyes, and a strange light appeared in them. "I see." His divine sense reached the end of the cave. About several thousands of feet underground, he saw a karst cave. That karst cave was not too big, but there were quite a lot of shiny items on the walls around it. There were also quite a lot of signs of mining. Su Ming could tell with just one glance that those shiny crystals were shaman crystals. This was an earthen vein that produced a lot of shaman crystals. Once Su Ming covered the entire place with his divine sense, he saw the entire shaman crystal vein. It was not big, and a small part of it had already been mined. The remaining ones amounted to about 10,000 shaman crystals. Perhaps some of the bigger tribes would not be interested in this, but to a small tribe like the shaman tribe, this was a huge fortune. However, it was clear that there was a dispute over the ownership of this place. White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe were fighting over this place, which was why they were in conflict. However, based on Su Ming's observations, it was clear that this place had been mined for many years, and these two tribes were still in conflict with each other. It was not difficult for him to guess that they must have found a way to resolve this dispute. It might not be the best way, but it could at least avoid war. However, all of this was changed due to Su Ming's coincidental arrival. A strange expression appeared on Su Ming's face. He did not expect that the cave abode he had his eyes on would have such a small treasure trove right in front of it. When he thought that White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe would definitely not let go of this place, and that there would not be a lot of trouble in the future, he felt a slight headache coming on. Oh well, since this shaman crystal vein is right in front of my house, it could be said that we're connected by fate. If that's the case, then I can't just give it up. Su Ming placed his hands behind his back and walked out of the cave. Before he left a hint of his divine sense in the cave. Thank you, everyone, for letting me occupy this place for 60-something hours. I don't have a lot of ambition. My only desire is to occupy this place for a little longer so that I can breathe in the air that I haven't seen for a long time. I beg for monthly votes so that I can stay here for a little longer. Thank you. This is the first chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 399. 3 days passed by very quickly. 3 days later, the vortex in a mountain range formed by the pattern of the three evils disappeared, and the mountain range looked just as it usually did. It was still a barren, evil mountain. Su Ming also returned to the cave abode he had created. With the mountain rock as the door to his cave abode and the power of the rune, he made the cave abode relatively safe. Then, he began making preparations to stay in this place for a long time. Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it forward in one of the stone chambers. Immediately, the old berserker in the berserker soul realm appeared at the center of the stone chamber. The old man still could not move. He lay there with his eyes shut, but his mind was clear. His hatred towards Su Ming had already reached a monstrous degree, and if he had the slightest chance, he would definitely kill Su Ming. However, Su Ming would not give him that chance. He brought out the old man's body and placed it in the stone chamber. Then, he took a few steps forward and swept his gaze across the old man's body. Suddenly, he lifted his right hand and tapped the old man's knees. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and the old man's knees instantly shattered. Su Ming did not stop. He tapped the joints on the old man's arms, and only when all the joints in the old man's body were crushed did he stop. The old man might not be able to move, but intense pain still spread through his entire body, causing him to open his eyes and glare at Su Ming. If his cultivation base had not been frozen, he would have used his gaze to kill Su Ming no matter what. This is the price you have to pay for chasing me down. Su Ming's expression was aloof. He lifted his right hand, and green light shone at the center of his brows. The small sword appeared in his hand, and he sliced open a gash on the old man's arm. Blood immediately flowed out, but Su Ming did not stop. Instead, he continued to leave bloody gashes on the old man's limbs. If you really came here with your clone, then I will wait for your real self here. Su Ming smiled coldly. Once he let go of the small sword, he brought out some herbs from his storage bag and placed them on the wounds on the old man's limbs. At the same time, he took out a few more herbs and planted them on the man's broken joints. These herbs were needed to refine the spirit plunder powder. They would not be used for healing. Instead, after coming into contact with blood, their roots would immediately spread out and drill into the old man's flesh, absorbing his vitality and flesh to grow. Su Ming had done this many times, and no one could withstand that sort of pain. However, even though the old man was trembling, his eyes did not change. He continued staring at Su Ming, as if he wanted to remember Su Ming's face firmly. This was the first time Su Ming had seen such a vicious gaze and an expression that completely ignored pain. As expected of a berserker in the berserker soul realm who has gone through the great disaster of the bone sacrifice realm, I admire your state of mind. If it wasn't because your greed won over your rationality and you were confident that you could kill me with one strike, you wouldn't have chased after me, Su Ming said calmly and planted the herbs in the ground. But it's a pity. Su Ming shook his head and patted his storage bag with his right hand. Immediately, 2 spirit plunder flew out and floated above the old man's forehead, causing the old man's eyes to be drawn towards the spirit plunder as if they were being sucked in. Su Ming fell into pensive silence for a moment, but he was still a little worried. He brought out another spirit plunder and had all 3 of them float above the old man's body. Only then did he relax. Your power is so great that if I didn't have the power of the god of berserkers, I would have died in your hand a long time ago. Su Ming seized the air with his right hand, and the small virescent sword flew towards him once again. Once he caught it, he stabbed it into the bloody wound on the old man's right arm. With a light flick, the old man's body shuddered, and his entire right arm fell limp. The tendons in his right arm had already been snapped by Su Ming. Once Su Ming did the same, he snapped the tendons in the old man's left arm and legs, then tore open a few wounds at the spots where blood flowed out, causing a large amount of blood to flow out and cover the floor of the stone chamber. But I've snapped the tendons in your arms and legs, and I've placed all your blood aside for the herbs to absorb. Your soul is also being absorbed by my soul catcher pearl. If that's the case, then even if you recover your power, I'd like to see just how much of it you'll be able to bring out. Su Ming stood up and spoke coldly. His words were heard by the old man, but his eyes were still filled with malice and did not change. Su Ming walked out of the stone chamber and told the fire ape, who had been watching him from the side, Xiao Hong, pry open his tendons once a day and release all his blood once a day. The fire ape's face was filled with excitement. It bared its teeth and nodded repeatedly. Its eyes shone brightly as it glared at the old man with hostility. It's a bit of a waste to turn this person into spirit plunder. Soul catchers are skilled in the art of undying and imperishable. This art is rather similar to the creation of spirit plunder. Perhaps I can experiment and see whether I can turn this person into that puppet. Su Ming remembered how the young soul catcher was still alive even after he lost his head. In silence, Su Ming went to another stone chamber and placed his right hand on his storage bag. Immediately, a bright yellow light shone brightly, and a gigantic cauldron appeared in the stone chamber. The cauldron was so big that it occupied most of the stone chamber. This stone chamber was something Su Ming had intentionally opened up. It was much bigger than the other stone chambers, and it was all prepared to store the cauldron. Once the medicinal cauldron was placed in the room, an ancient presence instantly filled the stone chamber. As he looked at the cauldron, Su Ming's breathing quickened slightly. He knew that there was a medicinal pill being created in the cauldron. He had his guesses and desires as to just what type of medicinal pill it was and just what sort of value it contained. This might be a rare medicinal pill that contains time within the cauldron. I wonder what sort of medicinal pill it contains after being refined for 1,000 years, Su Ming mumbled. He placed his hands on the cauldron and spread his divine sense outwards. Immediately, the cauldron shuddered, and distortions appeared around it, as if it was burning in an invisible manner. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. With the small sword in hand, he circled the cauldron once, occasionally stabbing it into the stone wall, causing the power of the world outside to enter the cauldron through the stone wall. Immediately, a large amount of the thick power of the world in his cave abode was attracted over, and it filled the area around the medicinal cauldron. It was absorbed by the cauldron to nourish the medicinal pill within. Su Ming had obtained the medicinal cauldron for some time, but he never had the time to continue refining it. As of then, he decided to stay in the cave abode for a long period of time, which was why he brought out the cauldron and started refining it. He had great expectations towards the medicinal pill within the medicinal cauldron. It was precisely because he did not know what it would be like. That was why, as he continued refining it, the feeling became stronger. After staring at the medicinal cauldron for some time, Su Ming left the stone chamber and sat down cross-legged in the central hall of his cave abode. It was quiet all around him. When he lifted his head, he could see the numerous small holes on the stone wall above him, and moonlight shone through them. This was not the first time Su Ming made this sort of design. When he lifted his head and looked at the moon in the sky through the small holes, he felt a little absent-minded, because when he was in his cave abode in Dark Mountain, he had also lifted his head to look at the moon. He had Xiao Hong by his side as well, just like how the fire ape was currently leaning against the wall not too far away and scratching its fur. Dark Mountain. I'll go back. Su Ming looked at the moon, and after a long while, he mumbled to himself. At that moment, he was different from when he first came to the land of South Morning. The feeling of not knowing what to do in an unfamiliar place no longer existed. He seemed to be used to being alone. He was used to the solitude of sitting cross-legged and cultivating in his cave abode in the middle of the night. Su Ming lowered his head and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was calmness in his eyes. When he completely calmed down, bell chimes suddenly reverberated within his body, and a layer of light surrounded his body. Once it spread out from the distance, it looked as if a bell-shaped cover had manifested on Su Ming's body. It was originally an illusion, but it was gradually gaining corporeal form. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, Su Ming lifted his right hand and formed a seal. When he pushed his hand forward, the bell-shaped cover floated forward slowly and shot through Su Ming's body. Once it appeared before him, it turned into a Han Mountain bell. Dark light shone within it, and immediately the strange rod snake flew out from the bell and circled around the cave abode. Almost the instant it appeared, the fire ape lifted its head and a wary look appeared on its face. It bared its teeth and let out a low growl, as if it was trying to show off its power. The rod snake that had turned into a black thread charged towards the fire ape, causing the fire ape to grab the rod and swing it around its body rapidly. It even leaped into the air and continued roaring. Su Ming's brand was on a rod snake, so he knew that it was just playing around and would not harm the fire ape. Besides, The fire ape's body was slowly recovering. Its speed and power were equivalent to a berserker in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. There would not be any injuries between these two beasts, so Su Ming ignored it and instead looked at Han Mountain Bell. This bell was a priceless treasure, but it was a pity that Su Ming could not bring out its full power. There were only 4 of the 9 heads on the bell. The only power it could bring out besides defense was its bell chimes to intimidate and trap its enemies. Su Ming's level of cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds, and he was prepared to refine Han Mountain Bell again to see if he could bring out more of this priceless treasure's power. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal, then pointed towards Han Mountain Bell. 9-headed dragon, Southern Emperor's stone. The moment Su Ming said those words and pointed towards the bell, Han Mountain Bell immediately started buzzing. Bell chimes reverberated within the cave abode and even shot out, reverberating in all directions in the mountain range. It was also at that moment that 7 long arcs charged towards Su Ming's cave abode from the north. Right in front of the long arcs was an old man. That old man had a protruding mouth and the cheeks of a monkey. He wore a large red robe and had a dark expression on his face. He was not slow, and there was a murderous aura surrounding his body. Judging by his level of cultivation, he was a medial shaman, and he was at the peak of that level. As for the 6 people behind him, 2 of them were medial shamans, and the rest were fledgling shamans at the peak. As the 7 of them charged forward, the old man in the lead saw Su Ming's cave abode from midair. He let out a cold harumph, and as he got closer, just as he was about to descend from midair, he suddenly heard bell chimes coming from within the mountain range. The bell chimes rose into the air leisurely, but when they fell into the old man's ears, it made his heart tremble. He staggered a few steps backwards and widened his eyes as he looked at the mountain range beneath him. He sucked in a deep breath. Before the old man could even speak, a man behind him cried out in surprise, "Damn it, what's that sound?" Second update, please get monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.